Hello, and welcome to The Gardens, located in sunny... The Gardens is one of the largest combined zoological habitat and theme parks in the world. With over 72 thrilling attractions and nearly 11,000 animals in our care, we know that every member of your family will find something incredible each time you visit. But that's just the start of your adventure. To really see what the park has to offer, I'll turn you over to our top 2 guides. Take it away, boys!
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, Chronicles episode number 1, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of the first spin-off title in the 1996 book series, Animorphs. My name is Coleman.
And my name is Mitchell, the funny one.
And for the first time in Thoughtspeak history, we have a third person amongst us. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nate. I'm a kind of a sci-fi fan, and Mitch and Coleman thought it'd be great for me to be included on this as my first Animorphs book.
He's a Pisces, and he enjoys long walks on the beach.
I'm a Scorpio.
We thought it appropriate to bring on a third person for one of the biggest books in the series.
Huge book.
And a big factor in that, or definitely a reason he's here, which we mentioned on the last episode. Nate, how many Animorphs books you've read besides this one?
0.
What? I'm not surprised.
There are actually people out there who did not read this book series when it was in its heyday.
At the height of its popularity, when we were all in about 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right around that time.
Yep.
I don't know how you missed the bandwagon.
We were even friends then.
I know.
I blame you.
At the height of K. Applegate's overthrow of our government, he missed out. And it's a shame. But we're here to rectify that tonight, which we've already started with him reading this book. Which is a pretty random book to jump in on, but we thought that would be part of the fun. So let's get to know Nate. Who is Nate? What makes him think and breathe? Probably his brain and lungs.
I'll tell you one thing. Nate is actually my oldest friend, because I met him back in 6th grade.
Nate, let's go with a couple questions here. Let's just to get to know who Nate is, what he's doing here, why we wanted him.
Oh, wait, can I tell you one thing that I think will perfectly sum him up? Before we started recording, he asked me if it would be all right if he made a Futurama reference. And I was like, bro, that's our entire show.
It was a loose reference.
It's really just, well, do you want to make the reference right now?
No. Let it come up naturally. It'll be beautiful.
It's going to be awkward.
I think this is the most important question to ask somebody on an Animorphs podcast specifically. Favorite alcoholic beverage?
Oh, there are so many. Lately, my wife and I have been getting into some of the craft beers, but I really like rum, particularly Kilo Kai. Some of that with Diet Coke is probably a good go-to for me.
That was my college drink, as Coleman should know.
Oh, I know.
Mitch, you introduced me to Kilo Kai.
I know. It's such a good drink. It spreads.
Do you drink? Is there any straight up liquor that you drink neat?
Every now and then I'll do some scotch or a whiskey, but I'm certainly not a connoisseur in that realm.
What does this have to do with Animorphs?
This is the most important Animorphs question. I'm telling you. Fans need to know. What about you, Mitch? You have anything to ask him that you think is relevant to the podcast?
Not particularly. I mean, the reason I picked Nate as our guest co-host, is that the right title that you deem?
Guest host. He is a guest visiting host.
So guest co-host is not an appropriate
that
title?
Implies a number of things that our listeners they're not ready to commit to a guest co-host.
He's
right?
a guest, and he is co-hosting the show.
That implies way too much.
I can just be a normal guest.
All right, so the reason I asked Nate to come on the show, other than the fact that he had never read any Animorphs books, was because I knew he had similar tastes to myself, for sure, and probably you in the long run. I mean, we all enjoy Doctor Who and, our various sci-fi series, and it's just a good fit, I think.
I think for someone to be able to get into the series, which was obviously written, at least from Scholastic's perspective, for a middle school audience, from the author's perspective, it was for war-ravaged 30-year-olds. But I think the most important thing to get into this series is to be into sci-fi in general and the ability to recognize universes created from scratch, it's got a lot of tropes of, UFOs and aliens and all that. But just like Doctor Who and, Battlestar Galactica or whatever, you got to be able to buy into it a certain bit. And I think Nate probably is okay with that from what I know of him.
Yeah, certainly I've been able to buy into it a bit. Starting out the book was kind of tough for me. The last book I read was it was the most recent book in the Song of Ice and Fire series. So
Game of Bones.
Definitely a little bit of a different writing style. Martin is pretty on the higher end of my reading level, I guess, and this is a much easier read. So it was kind of an adjustment for me.
Wow, you've been on the podcast for 7 minutes and you just called the author simple-minded in her writing.
I did not say that.
She's no George R.R. Martin, is basically what you said.
He just took off his glove and slapped K. Applegate in the face.
That said, I still did enjoy that. I still did enjoy reading it, and I think it sets up a good story. I don't know where it goes, obviously, but...
Well, and I was going to say, you went into this cold and not knowing a thing about what the story was about, right?
True.
You didn't Wikipedia this or anything,
just
did you?
morphing, that's all.
Just morphing is all he knew. And if you read the back of the book, it doesn't really tell you a whole heck of a lot.
Which I did not
about. Oh, yeah, and he didn't even read it. So he went in truly, really cool. I mean, he didn't even freaking look at the inside image art, which we should probably talk about because it's pretty cool.
Okay, well, let me ask some simple questions about the main book series and see what answers you have for them. Like,
Me?
No, not you. Shut up, Mitch.
I want to play too.
He was so excited.
So, okay, Nate. So this is an easy one to start out with. Who do you believe are the main antagonists of the main series?
Oh, it's like a quiz show.
Tobias. I feel like that was...
Did you say antagonist?
Antagonist.
And the bad guys. Who are the bad guys of the series?
I got excited.
Tobias is the bad guy.
I want to read that book.
So do I.
I would say the Yerks. I mean, they seem to be
ding, 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 ding.
ultimate bad guy, and they don't have any... They're kind of like the Daleks, where there really aren't any redeeming qualities of this race.
Until at least the episode where they do their redeeming qualities.
Somebody hasn't read book 19 yet.
Yeah, me.
Oh, really? Huh. So, okay, yeah, you completely got that right. Other acceptable answers would have been the Limist and the Andalites themselves. But
no, the most right answers he could have given was Visor 3. You probably didn't even, you wouldn't
Visor
have
70,
caught this.
Sub-Visor 728.
Yes, but Visor 3 in the very end.
Yeah,
I know that.
He's essentially the main big bad of the series.
Anyway, okay, so another question. Okay, so based on the end of this book and various things, who are the heroes of the main series?
The kids that Elfingor meets shortly before he dies?
Yeah, and just randomly, without looking it up, can you name any of their names?
Oh, I told him all the kids' names before we hit record. Well,
So this is even more of a test, because I remember Tobias.
Yeah.
And I think there was a Jake.
Yeah.
And
do you want to look at the illustration?
That's all I got. Tobias and Jake.
Okay, not bad. Those are important ones from what I've seen of the series.
Well, the other characters are never mentioned. I mean, Jake's not even mentioned in this. The only Animorph that's mentioned by name is Tobias.
I thought he mentions a few of their names at the end. Maybe not.
I don't believe so.
I don't think he does, because he realizes that Tobias is his son, and that seems to be his focus, which, fair enough.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, one more question. This one's not really hard, but it could be interesting. Based on this book alone, where would you say that the majority of the main series takes place? Like traveling around, on Earth, on some planet? Where would you just guess that the main series takes place?
Based on the end of this book, I got the impression that it takes place largely on Earth. And to reinforce that a little bit, I mean, just the little inklings that I had exposure to of Animorphs in the past, all the covers seem to be like very Earth like environments. Like the little bit you can see behind the morphing image. That's basically what I'm basing it on.
Well, you're bringing more knowledge to this than I thought, so
Yes.
you cheated, basically.
Hey,
Well, to be fair, your question about the setting was kind of easy. I thought you were going to ask like what he thought the series was about.
vague questions get vague answers.
Okay, Nate, explain Marco's relationship with his mother in context to the Lyrons. Go.
It's really complex, and
He's
I got
right. He knows.
You want to bust out the hard trivia? I'll be there.
Give this man an Animorphs medal.
Okay. So, Mitch, you have your own little test, right? You have your own little something you wanna bring to the table concerning Nate.
Yeah, I guess so. I thought we'd do it during the show, but we could do it right now.
We are on the show right now, Mitch.
No, I mean during the review as it popped up. But you know what? Fine, we'll do it now.
Yeah.
I just wanted to show you some official artwork of the aliens that are in the book series, the Hork-Bajir and the Taxxons.
Okay, I'm actually really excited because I have this picture in my mind, and I haven't looked at anything online for these other races, so I'm really curious to see what the official artwork...
Okay.
Okay, don't show him yet, Mitch.
He was so close.
Do not show him. Right now, the fun of this will be, we want to know what you're picturing in your head. First, describe, in your mind's eye, describe a Hork-Bajir.
Okay, so this is gonna sound kind of weird, but stick with me here. So you know the guys that come into the pyramid in the Fifth Element, the guys from space that have the Fifth Element and everything.
100%
So
yes.
I'm imagining those guys, but very lean and have blades pretty much everywhere. Is that remotely close?
That is not bad. I didn't even think of that. That's a good...
I'm not too, my mind's not too fresh on the old Fifth Element.
Well, they have
trivia
like all this
there.
bulky armor stuff, but as far as like their heads and stuff, that's not a bad comparison.
To your point about their heads, that's what I was really drawing from the Fifth Element creatures.
So
Okay.
do you want me to show him the picture?
Yeah, show him a Hork-Bajir.
This is from the cover of book 34, The Prophecy. So that's just the
interesting.
cover image, and then if you look on the inside, it shows them in much, much more detail.
Okay, so that's a lot more like reptilian dinosaur-esque than I thought it would be.
I think that turns out to be the case with most people. It was certainly mine. I thought they looked a lot more reptilian than I was picturing in my mind.
I haven't heard anybody else with this opinion, but for some reason, reading this in middle school and just having a picture in my head, I always pictured them very apish, like not full on like.
I was going to say I think I remember being younger and imagining them being kind of furry.
Yeah, well, not furry. Like I picture them completely hairless, but just kind of like muscly and like longer arms and like roundish heads. Like I never took into account the whole snake head thing, and I don't know. I just saw them more as like shock troopers, like thin versions of the Gamorreans from Return of the Jedi who run Jabba's palace. I always pictured that with blades all over them.
Okay. Again, that reference goes over my head, but Nate shrugged like, "Oh yeah, I got that."
I'm not an expert in the Star Wars races, but yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
Well, let's all take a break and play some Knights of the Old Republic
Oh,
on
jeez.
Xbox One. And then come back.
No, we've got to show Nate the picture of the Taxxon.
Okay. So, Nate, now, from what you have heard, describe to us a Taxxon.
So, these I don't really have anything to compare to, so I'm going to try to describe them, and I'm not great at describing things, so bear with me. They are black. I'm imagining them being about, I don't know, probably 8 to 10 feet long, with kind of centipede-esque. They've got various segments on their bodies. They've got nasty little eyes on one side with big giant red mouth things that are disgusting. Yeah.
So,
that about
multiple mouths?
Nope, just one big gross mouth.
Okay.
Well, maybe like a mouth within a mouth.
Yeah, okay. Fair
Like
enough.
some sort of like sea creature thing.
Yeah.
Like
Okay, show him a picture.
yeah.
Um,
Is this also more reptilian than I'm expecting?
no. So this is from book 43, The Test. And I don't know if I should show him the cover.
Why?
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Spoilers.
So, if this were black, Oh, it's got like lobster hands.
It's funny that you will open it up and you can see more
Yeah,
detail.
fair enough. So I imagine them being black, like entirely sleek black.
Mm-hmm.
A little closer to the ground. The front of the creature. So I imagine that the eyes were like recessed into its head.
Yeah.
And then the mouth was part of that. So in my vision, the body was one long segment with little legs, and then the head was just a slightly altered segment.
See, it sounds like you're describing like some kind of Lovecraftian horror, which would be amazing. But you're still pretty close. I mean, basic elements are there. I always pictured, and is somewhat, close to the books, but I always pictured if you were to do a live action version of a Taxxon, like the skin, the thickness of it, how it'd look and everything, I always saw it as like a pustule or like a pus-filled like bump on your arm, like the consistency of that, but that's like their entire body. So like if you even pinpricked them, like the whole Taxxon would explode in just like goop. Because that's how they describe them whenever they fight them.
Yeah.
I think I might be the only person who just imagines exactly that image.
Yeah.
Were you spoiled by the book art?
No, that's like the first instance of Texans showing up in the book art, I think.
Oh.
Well, me and Nate, we're just creative thinkers, man. We're outside the box. You just eat whatever Scholastic shoves down your throat.
Yeah, Mitch.
I'm so accepting of the official fan art or official art.
Yeah. Well, I think they could have at least done something different with the lobster claws, because she describes in the book as having little claws, and they made them like flat out crab claws in the pictures.
I was expecting more like little needle type claws.
Yeah, they say cones. They say cones. Their feet are little cones.
Yeah.
Which I thought they do not look like cones.
I was expecting little ice cream cones.
It's a recurring joke for us that the marketing team for this book series hasn't actually read the books.
Yeah.
They're kind of guessing.
So they just draw whatever they feel like.
Sounds like a pretty sweet job.
Okay, well, Mitch, unless you have some hidden sleeve agenda, and you want to ask Nate some crazy question on the air where he can't back out of it, we can move forward.
No, let's get into it. I am super excited to talk about the Andalite Chronicles. Fun fact, I almost considered requesting that this book, since it is a prequel, be our first ever episode of Thoughtspeak, but I refrained.
Okay, well, let's see if mine and Nate's enthusiasm matches yours.
We'll see.
On this episode of Thoughtspeak. All right, yeah, let's move into our book discussion.
This section of the park houses one of the most extensive research libraries devoted to animal biology on the West Coast. Your guides will provide a thorough summary of any book that might catch your eye. Careful though, once you get them started, they'll never want to stop.
Tonight, we're talking about the first book in the Chronicles series, spin-off books of the Animorphs book series, the Andalite Chronicles. Big book, big, different take on the series that came out of nowhere. I guess once the series started getting really popular, they let her write one of these things, and here we are. So, do you want to start talking about the cover and what that might entail?
Yeah, I don't know. This was besides the artwork for Axe back on book 8, I want to say, back on the Alien. Mm-hmm. This is the second official Andalite artwork that we've ever seen, so it's pretty exciting. We can see that they've retconned the weird googly stalk eyes that they used to have.
Yeah.
And now they're more like sleek and cool looking. And I don't know, it's a lovely little cover here that folds open, and there's lots of colored illustrations, and boy was I pleased seeing that as a kid.
Yeah. Let's talk to Nate real quick. In general, what do you think of just the physiology of the Andalite design?
Oh yeah, because that alien species here, this centaur design, is, really prevalent throughout the entire series, not just this book, but throughout the rest of the series.
One of the main characters in the Teenager Kids is one of these aliens, so he's walking around with them throughout the entire series.
To answer your question, it was hard to accept it at first.
It's like in the back of your mind, right? Like, oh yeah, this guy's a freaking centaur.
Yeah, basically. And I mean, as the story progressed, it was just a piece of knowledge that I had, and I was able to get past like that. I thought it was kind of a weird choice for an alien species.
Yeah, you tend not to think about it much unless he specifically mentions his hooves or his tail, or his stalk eyes.
I did think it was interesting that they eat with their feet.
That is a huge, heavily guarded secret that we did not discover until, book 8, right?
Or, no, they go into a little bit in book 7, don't they? Where they're asking him questions and stuff?
No, I think that was the one where they give him the cop-out answer.
Yeah, but that's when they start discussing it.
Yeah, but it built up to it, and we didn't find out until book 8.
Yeah. So,
real exciting.
As far as this picture goes, I never like how much they make the tail curved. Like, the way they slice and the way they fight with it, like, that thing would hook onto everything, the way they have it depicted.
Yeah, exactly. That does look like a really weird design for a blade. I imagine it more like a blade, like a sword blade, kind of. Not like this weird... It looks like a talon, really.
Maybe they can relax it, and they just don't discuss it. Relax the talon so it doesn't get caught on stuff.
Oh, it retracts
relax
like
the talon. Awesome band name.
Yeah, I guess it could work kind of like a cat claw, maybe. I don't know. I was thinking like it just kind of can go limp.
That would be kind of amazing if it could shoot out whenever they needed it. Except I think the fact that it's always there is kind of important, because every time anyone ever sees an Andalite for the first time, like the humans, they're always like, oh, wow, he'd almost be like this cute little alien if he didn't have this humongous blade on his tail.
They always describe him as a deer crossed with a scorpion.
Which I think the picture goes more horse. I think all the depictions don't do enough deer.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Deer is kind of a weird suggestion for that.
Yeah, I definitely thought horse when I was reading this. Although Mitch lent me the book, and I definitely saw the cover, so that could have
affected it.
Altered my
Exactly. You ever hold the book up and cover the back end of Elfangor, so it just looks like he's got the two little dangly, gangly front legs?
Oh yeah,
he's more like a tap dancer.
Oh, what's it called? A satyr? Yeah, like in Chronicles of Narnia and stuff. They have the one they meet right at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Sir Tumnus.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of...
That is a satire,
I'm thinking of something else.
Fair enough.
Oh, you said Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm drunk.
I can't remember the name. We've done that episode, Nate. We don't need another one.
And then I was thinking Golden Compass, and I don't know.
You should be ashamed of yourself for that.
I am.
So this does have a pretty intricate cover, and as we mentioned in the last episode, man, they really marketed the shit out of this book. I mean, they really had promos in the back of like 3 books leading up to it. I'm sure they had pamphlets and flyers and everything else.
They were in such a rush to get this book out faster, they actually had her split it into 3 separate stories. You noticed how the book was split into parts 1, 2, and 3? Mm-hmm. Those were initially released as little separate mini books so that they could get them out the door faster.
I've seen those. When looking for me and Mitch basically collected this entire series now in paperback form. I saw at least 2 of the split up Andalite Chronicles books.
I did too, and you know what? I kind of wanted to buy them. Really, I haven't, but
I'm going to buy every single cover art version of Megamorphs #2. It's just different colors, but I still want to collect them all since that's my favorite, Megamorphs book. But anyway, so getting into the book proper, the words and story and such. This one starts pretty strong, especially if you are a fan of the main series. But since we have a non-fan on the show, I definitely want to hear from him first. How does this book start out, Nate, and what are your initial thoughts jumping into it?
Just recap the beginning part of the story?
Yeah, how does it start?
So, the story starts out with the prologue, in which Elfangor has crashed on Earth. I believe he's at a construction site, and he believes he's about to die, so he's recording all of his memories into his, I think he was in a fighter. His fighters or his ship's computer, in hopes that either other Andalites or humans or someone will find this recording to share the knowledge of everything that's happened. He shares that he's shared how to morph with 5 teenage humans.
Yeah, he's sitting up in his cockpit with his Talkboy tape recorder, just going off on everything he's been through. He's talking about his journey thus far. And he also mentions that he's specifically there on Earth to look for the time matrix.
Yes, and this recording of his, it's become kind of a big deal in the Animorphs fandom, because every blog out there is called the Harak Delest, which is what this recording is to an Andalite. It's their last memoir of what they did with their lives, what mistakes they made, like who they really are. It's something they send off to their families, or just for the general Andalite population to see what they've done and who they really are, and what legend will carry on through the ages.
And so that K.A. Applegate could write a book about it.
Yeah, convenient exposition. That's all this book is.
But it's much needed.
The interesting thing about this, Nate, is the fact that, yes, this prologue is basically moments into the first book. Like, the first book starts, these kids are in a mall, they're like, hey, let's take the dangerous route home through this construction site. They see this UFO land, and as it lands is this scene taking place, where he's inside the fighter, and he's giving this, last moment's talk.
Okay, and actually, as I was reading the prologue, I felt like this was another view of part of the story that was already told.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I definitely got that feel as I was reading it.
Yeah, which
good,
I think is,
because that's exactly what they were going for.
That's pretty intricate for a series like that. Like we've said, Scholastic, the publisher, thought they were getting a young adult series, but the authors really tried to, write just a good sci-fi series. And there's some parts that, blew over our heads as middle schoolers that now we can appreciate a lot more.
I'd say so.
Moving on from the prologue, which just sets up, this story and giving it a reason for why it should be told, we jump straight into 21 years before the start of the Animorphs series, with Elfangor not being a prince or a legend or any of this. He's just a kid in training to possibly be a soldier. Right,
yeah. The story starts out with Lil Elfie, we call him, practicing his tail fighting with his commander, his teacher, old Sofor, in their big old dome ship. And I guess he kind of sucks at it because he, loses all the time.
Yeah, he's the flawed, never gonna make it protagonist.
Well, at this point, he's still thinking with his head. He needs to start thinking with his heart.
That's the real journey of this book.
Well, anyway, as soon as old Sofor shuffles out of the scene, we get another character shoehorned in, which turns out to be Arboron, another supporting character. That's going to be pretty important throughout the rest of the book.
And I think we're still somewhat skipping ahead into this opening, because the actual first chapter of this book is basically young Elfangor explaining the universe. It's, here is this, I'm part of this Andalite race who, is the heroes, and the Yeerks are the enemy, and he's describing Hork-Bajir and all these things. And I actually have my first and most important note right here on the first page, with how he says, if you've been reading the series, you know about morphing technology and turning into animals. I mean, that's what the entire series is about. And it says in this first part that the morphing technology is top secret within the Andalite race. Did you pick up on that, Mitch?
No. I mean, yeah, I knew the Andalites didn't just dole it out to every Andalite.
See, when reading this original series, I actually thought, most Andalites could probably morph. But really, it's like, I'm sure the Yeerks know about it, obviously, but I didn't realize that it was, kind of just the warrior class. They're the only ones who may even know about this technology.
Reading this, I was also under the impression that most or all Andalites could morph, so I'm glad you mentioned that.
I'm not. Please keep those comments to yourself in the future.
I had never thought about it that way. So I'm sure the normal Andalite population is aware of morphing, because you can't keep something like that secret, but they do treat it as more of a specialty weapon than I ever gave it credit for.
Do you feel like that opening segment brought you up to speed on the series as a whole? Or at least gave you enough base information.
Definitely some key pieces. They did a good job setting things up, and then things that weren't explained there, or were only lightly touched on there, were reiterated or explained later. So.
Oh, cool. As long as you weren't left in the dark.
No, I felt fine going through it.
What are we, in space or something? What the hell is this book series?
Where is this happening? What is this?
So, what was that as far back as you needed to jump there?
Are you talking to me? You got specified names here, bro. We got 3 people on the show now.
Coco. That you?
Don't call me on that on the show. Just at night. Yes, that's fine. That's all I wanted to go back to was the fact that morphing technology is definitely explained from the point from a different perspective, and that intrigued me.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah. It's an in-depth look at something that we haven't had that much time with, I guess.
Can we discuss the morphing real quick, or should?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was a little when they were explaining the 2-hour limit.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this would be better placed later when Arbron gets stuck as a Taxxon. But when Elfingor was explaining the 2-hour limit, I felt like that's kind of arbitrary. Like, it seems like a 2-hour limit, hard cut off, you're stuck forever. Well, why is it 2 hours? What is important about that 2-hour mark that makes it only 2 hours? Can some Andalites, are they more resistant to being stuck forever, so they can go for 2.5 hours?
That is a very interesting point, and something we've talked about a couple times now.
That's something the entire fandom talks about, since the books kind of screw with the continuity on that a little bit.
And what we've come up with, our Thoughtspeak version of how the morphing technology works, is yes, there is a 2-hour limit, but once you hit 201, you can still morph back. It's just like morphing through concrete, drying concrete. It's incredibly, incredibly hard. But you could suppose, with enough willpower, you could destroy that 2-hour limit.
At one point in the series, there were 2 or 3 characters who were trying to morph back in time from wolves. And they went 7 minutes over, and they were able to do it very slowly, but they made it work.
They had to have another character coaching them out of it, and they were barely morphing back to human.
So it's there to definitely create a very real threat.
Oh,
as far as the series is concerned.
I totally understand why there are limits on it, because you wouldn't want to be able to just infinitely morph to an infinite number of things, because you'd be the most powerful being ever.
Yeah, I mean,
basically,
that's
Visor 3.
That's some kind of crazy concept someone would bring up in a sequel series to this book or something.
Oh my gosh. Don't get me started.
Yeah. But anyway, that's a great point. And do you kind of understand how they explain morphing in general, as far as, these things, or these aliens and everything else, they're morphing things that are both smaller and bigger than them. So does this book go into that at all? Or at least enough for you to buy that, Nate?
Yeah, I guess I hadn't really given it any thought. I just took it for what it said.
You know what? And that's really all you need to do to enjoy the story. I think going into... Because they actually do go into what happens to their extra mass when they morph things that are smaller. It all gets transported up into this magical space zone. And it really does go more in depth with it. But you say it works without knowing all that stuff. So
yeah,
that's
and
good to know.
That wasn't explained in this book, right? I didn't
No.
somehow.
No.
Okay, good. Because you were saying that, and I thought, oh god, did I just miss all of these crucial details?
No, I don't think Elfangor mentioned his mass hanging out in Z space at any point.
I guess I just kind of took it that the body, even at a cellular and very microscopic, nanoscopic scale, was altering, and it just magic happened.
Yeah, well, it's a good assumption.
As long as you're aware that this isn't, 1980s Transformers. They are pulling mass from somewhere. They're not creating mass or destroying mass. So
okay.
It does go into it a little bit throughout the rest of the normal series. So
good.
Appreciate it.
Well, I do.
There's science.
That would cross my mind eventually.
Yeah.
I think as I got further into the series, I'm like, hey, wait a second. You can't just...
I've been moxied.
Right. Well, moving on with the actual story in the book, we're at the point where we're still introducing main characters. I mean, we know Elfangor pretty well. Arboron comes in. He's another Andalite who, like Elfangor's, kind of a newbie, an heiress as well, and he's kind of a prick, really.
Well, he's more casual. He's like if Andalites in general, especially these Eris, are kind of like Vulcans or something. They're very logical and stiff-browed and trying to sound cooler than they are.
Dude, Arboron's the Marco of Andalites.
Yeah, Arboron's the laid-back, understands his place in the universe, and he wants to be a warrior too. But he almost sees beyond like what he should. He's actually more mature, but he's still cracking jokes because he's still like a teenager. But he gets it, I think, more than Elfangor does, the situation that they're in.
I would agree with you, actually. It felt to me like Elfangor is really stiff, and no, this is the way we have to act, and we can't deviate from that.
Well, yeah, it does make the story, I think, flow a little bit better to have two contrasting characters kind of going back and forth as they do. And they're almost immediately right away, plot's moving along, they're summoned to their captain's bridge. And their captain makes a strange request of them. He actually asks their advice on what to do about this Skrit Na ship that they've detected in their sector or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're going to decide to send these two newbies in.
Which the whole Skrit Na, I love the introduction of them because it basically took our urban legend of like gray aliens and brought them into the universe.
The Na, I believe, are the stereotypical grays.
Yeah, who are kidnapping cows and doing experiments on people.
Yeah, I never picked that up. I don't think as a first time reader on this. I was kind of surprised by that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't make that connection either, but that's actually kind of funny.
It describes them as like kind of short, gray, and big bulging eyes, and they're constantly, for some reason, abducting humans for their collection and strange cow animals and doing experiments and then dropping them back on Earth later.
Well, that and the most telltale sign is that they fly literally a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I took all this in, and I even imagined little gray aliens like the classic big eye things, and I just didn't, for whatever reason, make the connection like, oh, they're playing off of, quote, aliens.
The fact that the Skrit are, like, kind of cockroachy are it's kind of weird. That doesn't seem like it fits.
Well, I think that was just their way of, I don't know, making them more alien in general. Like, it's not how we picture them. We always try to relate everything back to humans. And I think a big part of Michael Grant and Kay Applegate's part of creating all these different universes and aliens within them was trying to actually make them seem alien and not just a bunch of humanoids running around like Star Trek or something.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good case, except for maybe the Chi.
What, dog alien robots? It's not weird enough for you?
I'm just saying how human-like they
are. The Chi are so normal with their dog parts and the raping of wolves and...
Well, anyway, these two are selected for this super special secret awesome mission because of their small stature, since they're the youngest Andalites on the ship. And of course, they're sent over there to board this Skrit Na vessel, and they have a little space battle where they shoot some lasers. They're sent over after that to board the ship. And this is where we get all that exposition drop on the Skrit Na and exactly how their species works.
Yeah, they're cocooning all over the ship, and you've got all these Earth things and other alien artifacts that aren't associated with the Skrit Na that they've collected and stolen from other planets, and it definitely sets them up as, just weird aliens who are out to make a buck or fill their alien zoos.
Yeah, they're collectors, essentially. Also aboard
they're
the
ship.
They're the junkmen. Yeah, basically. The what are those things from Star Wars?
Jawas?
Since you're always... Is
Jawas?
that what it is?
I was actually going to compare them to Star Trek and the Ferengi, who are... They're collectors and money makers of the universe. So
Plot-wise, this is where we've got another couple of key character introductions right now, because aboard this Skritna ship are two humans, Lauren and Chapman.
what did you think? I mean, you'd have to venture back to and Nate, I'm sorry, you can't contribute to this topic, but when they said Chapman, do you remember when you first read this book and were you like, whoa, Chapman's there? Did you associate it with the Chapman we know, or maybe his father or something? Or
Yeah, I thought it might have been an ancestor
yeah,
or something, but I guess not.
no, it's just Nate, for your info, Chapman is a pretty integral character to the main series. He's like their vice principal at their school.
Yeah, and he's also a controller, a human controller.
Yeah, I knew that. They explained that later in the...
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's actually one thing. I mean, I'll get more into it with the review, but that's one thing I didn't especially like about this book. It's kind of like shoehorning a reference into the regular series, like a cameo or something, except he's also an important character in this book. You know?
Yeah, I think it makes sense that he's there, seeing as how the construction site, is obviously in the town where all this stuff is going down at, and that's where the time matrix is, and it just makes sense that, that's where Chapman would end up.
No, luckily we have a god in this series who makes coincidences part of the plot, but
well, and you never know. Maybe Krayak is using Chapman as well.
yeah. And for Nate's reference, that's basically the Satan of the series.
Okay, yeah, they allude to a dark one, but they don't refer to him by name or anything.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I want to talk about that later when it comes up.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the regular plot, though. We've got Chapman, we've got Lauren, and there are two humans who the Andalites are just, they don't have, at least especially these Arists, they don't have any experience with humans, and they're like, whoa, how are they standing up with two legs and stuff,
Yeah, well, they can't even understand them at first because they don't have their translators worked out to address English yet. Mm-hmm. Which I like that they actually commented on that, on all the different languages these aliens are speaking.
Oh, and real quick, we're going to have a lot of these side notes because I'm just interested in hearing what Nate's going to say about something within the universe. But the way the Andalites communicate, what are your feelings on that, Nate?
I was okay with it. As far as a reader buying into this universe, there is an infinite possibility of how creatures work out there, so why not have a race that communicates by thought?
And you can kind of buy into the fact that they can speak to a completely different race, and that race kind of understands them because they're not language based. It's not a language. It's almost pushing an incredibly specific feeling into somebody's brain.
So I thought of it as, if you think of this in computer terms, all computers understand ones and zeros, and there may be different interpretations of those orders of ones and zeros, but effectively anything over the computer is a 1 and 0. And so I kind of thought the Thoughtspeak was just like a raw version of ones and zeros that anything could interpret. Does that make sense?
That's a very interesting way to put it.
Nope.
It's not that great, but I tried.
That's over my head.
No, I think that made perfect sense in my head. It was almost as if ones and zeros were transmitted into my brain.
Oh my gosh.
And I just got it. No, yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm going to keep bringing up things like that, specifically Nate.
Keep drilling him.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on Elfangor seeing the humans for the first time. I thought it was interesting because he especially observes them only having 2 legs, and he thought, okay, they're going to fall over all the time. How do they walk? How do they balance themselves? I thought that was really interesting for a member of an interstellar species to be so amazed by a 2-legged creature, which is actually kind of neat that not all of the not all of the races out there are humanoid. It just, I don't know, makes it unique compared to a lot of the other sci-fi series out there where a lot of the other races are very human looking.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And that's a really good point for the series overall, because we do get introduced to a lot more alien races throughout the universe, and for the most part, especially the ones that the Andalites know of and everything, there are a couple other bipedal creatures and races out there, but they always have either a tail or they're kind of like shrugged over and they use like one arm to kind of like three-leggedly walk or something along those lines. So this really is like a new species of them that they don't really understand. And it puts it in perspective. It is kind of weird, and even on our own planet, it's weird that we evolved to just start like intricately balancing to move around. There's not even that many creatures on our planet that do that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
We're pretty good at standing, I'll give us that.
millions of years just to master that one thing. And then, maybe we'll stop, like warring with each other at some point. But as long as we got the standing thing down.
Well, for all that evolving, I sit a lot.
I prefer sitting.
We're
like I'm
de-evolving
wasting it.
now back. We tried out this whole standing thing, and now we're sick of it, so we're going back. I want prehensile tails again. When's that coming? Like monkeys, they have prehensile tails.
Oh, tails, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Goku.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be actually really nice because then I could hold my glass of water with my tail while I'm using my hands to type, and then just like lift it up to my mouth, not have to take a break from typing or whatever I'm doing. Video games, probably really handy there.
Google, get on it.
I would
Make
type with
the
my
Google
tail.
tail.
I would type with my tail and hold things with my hands. But that's just me.
I would hold my tail with my hands and get nothing done.
I'd hold my hands in my tail. Anyway, so there's a plot to this book, right?
Yeah, there's so much plot that you are just ignoring, trampling over here. And I'm so excited to talk about it too. So we've got aliens mixing. It's a huge alien mixer on this ship, I tell you what. But in the end, Elfangor manages to convince Lauren and the other human to, put down their weapons and trust them into returning them to Earth. So we see them coming together here.
Yeah, I think the humans are just like shocked and awed by the entire situation, so they're getting defensive, obviously. That's why they grabbed these weapons and held the Skritna up and tried to capture their ship. But the Andalites come on board, and even though they're these two risks, they seem confident and that they know what they're doing, and maybe they're good guys. So, especially Lauren, less so Chapman.
Well, yeah, Chapman's unconscious for most of it, but
Yeah.
as soon as the Andalites are in control there and he wakes up, he immediately goes into his kind of D-bag prick mode and says some insulting things to Elfangor.
I almost would have liked it more if Chapman was like way nicer. Like he was a really great guy who we liked in this book a lot.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering why they decided to go the making him a D-bag route.
It's an interesting character arc now that we have his origin or whatever. It's an interesting character arc that in the second book we sympathize with him because he's a guy who, for Nate, for your knowledge, this guy gives up his freedom, becomes a controller with a yerk in his head to save his daughter from becoming a controller. And so he sacrifices his own freedom so that she is left alone. And
So he's like a Snape character almost, where he's D-bag for most of his life, and then he has to make a tragic sacrifice for a small child.
So we have a redemption story buried in the heart of the Animorphs book series.
Nice.
Get on writing it. We want to see the Chapman Chronicles. Applegate.
It's a lot of going to college for your education degree.
Hey, there could be some interesting stuff in there. You see some drinking parties and
Some sharing parties.
Chapman gets turned down for joining a frat. I'll show them. I'll come back and put yerks in all their heads.
He's like a Cartoon Network villain.
Dude, it would be awesome if it was Chapman and Visor One, like, starting the yerks, like, their whole operation on Earth. And yeah, they started it out as a frat house.
It's like Animal House, but yeah, they're also like, taking control of people and enslaving the human race.
It's Yerk House.
Yerk House?
So that would be an excellent book.
And back to the book we're actually talking about.
You make it seem like we're trying to escape from this, but we're really not.
So they take over the Skritna ship. They convince these humans to not blast them out an airlock, and they think that they are going to be heroes among the Andalites for doing this very simple task.
Yeah, kind of. We get the Andalites taking the humans back to their dome ship, and this is where we get a lot of just background information in general on the Andalite race, which we haven't had throughout the series just yet. So we kind of learned, I think this is the first instance of their scoops being mentioned. So I'm looking forward to the Axe building his scoop storyline coming up in the books.
Yeah, or his home. Just the way the Andalites live. Very interesting cultural stuff, of course. You would hope that in a book called The Andalite Chronicles, we'd learn a little more about their day-to-day lifestyle. So,
well, yeah, a little bit, but I don't know. It almost made it seem like they're so nomadic still, except they just settle down to work on spaceship parts. And,
it's interesting.
They got a really weird
culture
economy.
Well, no, I think it's really interesting the fact that they almost went through a phase that we humans are in now, where we congregated in cities and things like that. They mentioned that. And then they realized that it'd be much better to just have small communities spread out all over their planet and live more nomadically, but still have the communication of like something like the internet.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm sure the Nazis proposed something just like it.
I think they did.
That was an interesting place to go with that.
Well, we've made comparisons to the Andalites and Nazis before.
Oh, okay.
As you should know by the way this book turns out in the end, with the quantum virus and whatnot.
I think they're more like communist China, but that's just me.
Yeah, I got more of a communist
vibe
than a
regardless
Nazi
of what dictatorship you guys subscribe to for this.
Communists, not dictators. Totally different things. But, anyway, so... where are we?
Oh my god!
I think we're on the dome ship.
They're walking around talking about stuff on the dome ship, but this is also where, after a little bit of bonding time with the humans, especially between Elfangor and Lauren,
in the dome itself,
yeah, they've been chatting each other up pretty consistently so far. But this is where we actually get them now. They think that they're going to be assigned to taking the humans to Earth, which they are, but they don't realize that it's going to be just them, along with another key character to the story, good old War Prince Alaron, or Prince Al, if you want to call it.
Which they insinuate at this point that he is someone who should be revered, and obviously he's a great legend, but something really, really dark and bad happened, and he is to be shamed because of it.
Yeah, he's the disgrace of their people. I mean, he is the Kingslayer.
Oh, Al.
Oh, War Prince Al. So now they're all boarding Alaron's ship, the Jahar, which reminds me of Jafar. That's what I
thought the same thing.
That's what I want to say every time. Jafar.
Me too.
Get on the Jafar, quick! Escape with the Iago ship. That's his getaway pod.
Next week on a special After Dark episode, we review all 4 movies in the Aladdin series.
Oh, we should.
I'm so excited for that.
Anyway, as soon as they're aboard Alaron's ship and actually take off for Earth, it's quite boring. And I like how they explain this. They couldn't travel there with light speed because they would age themselves too much.
Yeah, this is a book series aimed at middle schoolers, bringing up space relativity. Boom.
It certainly taught me something. I'll give you that. But that's why they mentioned that they're taking so long on this space voyage. And as they're doing this, people they busy themselves in their own ways, and Arboron takes to checking out some data that he retrieved from that Skritna ship. that he
Which
stole.
Which they make fun of him for being a total nerd, messing around with a
Yeah,
computer.
basically. Which is weird because, like, getting to know Axe, you would think, like, all Andalites are just kind of nerdy like that.
Well,
But there's a specific subgenre of nerd that even Andalites will bully.
Well, no, Axe, if you really read the series, Axe is kind of like he was probably like a jock or something in the Andalite culture, because he's like, I was never paying attention in class, or we had a big game after class, so I didn't hear
Yeah, he
that
did
one
mention
thing.
there was a game he was thinking about one time.
Yeah, dude.
And a female.
Axe would have been the frat guy if he had come to them later on in his life cycle.
Sure. Well, anyway, it's through checking out this information that Arbron comes to discover the existence of the fabled relic known as the Time Matrix, which is a pretty big deal in this universe.
Yeah, and they go into a little bit, they bring up the fact that, it was created possibly by spooky Elimus, who we're very afraid of. Very obvious setup for the rest of the story. Was it
obvious, or did you just think it was a bare bones explanation as to why this series could have a time machine?
I did, actually. So, because I don't think they had... Maybe the explanation of the Elimus was already done, but at this point I was thinking that it was some, like, past race that no longer existed. Like, we found this ancient artifact that does this awesome thing type of deal.
Right,
Like a
so
Mass
you
Effect
in other words,
kind of
didn't expect anything to come of this Elemist plot thread?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I
that's
did
good.
not.
I guess that's our Animorphs knowledge getting the better of us.
Well, yeah, obviously. Especially since we've read the first 13 books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, though, I think just bringing up the time matrix is maybe not as clumsy as I believed it to be. It did feel like it was, leading into later events, giving us some setup for that.
Yeah. Well, and I guess if you were reading this thing when it was originally published in 3 parts, you were waiting around a while for
Yeah.
the next part.
Nate, so they just introduced a time machine. Where are you at on board with this story? Because we got aliens, we've got sci-fi tropes, we've got morphing, and they just within 40 pages they bring in time travel. What
Well,
are your
nobody's
thoughts?
actually morphed at this point in the story yet.
Yeah, they've talked about morphing though.
Yeah,
Definitely.
they've talked about it, but they haven't done
But
it.
that's what I'm saying. This seems like a lot. Are you at
Oh
this
yeah,
point?
it's throwing a lot of sci-fi at him.
Yeah,
It seems like a lot of Doctor Who.
that's true. You could
I mean,
compare it.
obviously not like taken directly from Doctor Who, but a lot of Doctor Who elements kind of reworked and brought back into a story in with a different spin.
Yeah. No, that's a good frame of reference as well, because Doctor Who in the first 10 minutes of an episode might set up like a bar full of aliens, and then he's obviously a time traveler coming in, and something that's that condensed, that much sci-fi condensed into a universe that you're just being introduced to. Doctor Who's a pretty good example of that.
Way to go. Good reference. So in the discovery of this super important time matrix, the team kind of makes a snap decision. Well, really, it's Aileron's decision to postpone the humans' return to Earth in order to go after the time matrix instead, which was in this second Skritna ship that happened to escape during their pursuit.
Yeah, and Chapman immediately becomes the annoying character in the room who's going to be like, I'm contrarian to everything going on because I'm obviously a bad character.
Yeah, and I was interested in wondering Nate's opinion on how he thought the whole situation with Chapman was going to turn out. Did you think he was going to be the primary antagonist of the book, or did you just think he was going to be one of these annoying side characters, or did you think you'd come to find him endearing, or...
So, what I thought one of two things would happen. That either he would become not the bad character, but he would be working with the bad group that at this point I don't think I was introduced to. I don't think I knew about the Yerks yet. Or if I had, they were lightly touched on. And
Right.
At the beginning of the
nothing
first
to-
chapter in the overview of the universe, they mentioned them briefly, yeah.
Well,
Okay,
yeah, they
yeah.
mentioned they're in a war with the Yerks.
Yeah.
So.
I didn't think that Chapman himself would be any real threat.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of a Weasley character.
Yeah, and actually, I found him kind of annoying because, like Mitch was saying, he seems contradictory to be contradictory. That they could have been saying, "We're taking you home right now," and he'd been like, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to hang out in space."
Right, yeah.
He's just a cynical jerk.
He's never got anything good to say. He's not happy. He's not helpful in any capacity.
Right. In fact, the entire series would have been amazing if they just pushed him out of an airlock right now. Would have solved so many problems.
No, I think it would have been badass if right off the bat when he said his initial crack at Elfangor, if Elfangor had just stabbed him in the throat and killed him instantly.
Book
and
series.
Was like, okay, we're done with that.
Book series would have taken a turn at that point.
Awesome.
Well, maybe the other series were part of a different timeline, like Back to the Future style, where they altered the past. And
do not mention alternate timelines on this podcast. We have taken a firm stance against it because our fans are fighting us.
My apologies.
A fan is fighting Coleman.
We here at Thoughtspeak believe in the Terminator style of time travel, where if someone goes back in time, then they had already gone back in time, and you can't change the past. Whatever's happening has already happened.
But what if every time you time travel, you're actually going to a different universe rather than moving forward or backward in the universe that you started in?
All right, we're hooking this guy up with a copy of Book 11, The Forgotten.
I don't know. It's just a fun little fight that we've had with a couple of fans, and I don't like the Back to the Future. Some magical force is changing the future as you're affecting
there.
it.
Yeah.
I like the idea that you go back in time and you create the present that you came from.
So you're talking about the Bill and Ted time travel rules,
exactly,
where they can just be like, "Oh, when I get home in the future, I'll remember to put the car keys out on the lawn right here by this bush," and then they're suddenly there.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say it's more straightforward. It's a little easier to follow plots like that. Because when you start mixing in all these different timelines, it gets really convoluted.
Well, isn't there like 11 copies of Fry in the room?
I don't remember.
By the end of the series?
Yeah, there's quite a few Frys, a few Benders. We're referencing Futurama for people still tuned into this episode and haven't left yet because we're talking about time travel so much. We're now talking about Futurama, but yeah, I appreciate that sci-fi more when something like Futurama, where they've gone into that one moment in time throughout multiple episodes and nothing's changing. It's just they're adding more layers to what happened and revealing more about what led to, Fry going to the future and everyone doing things.
Yes, thank you for explaining that. That was well needed.
It was. I may or may not cut it all out, but
anyway, and then the worst part of this mission, by the way, is that their destination happens to be the Taxxon homeworld.
So their argument for changing their mission of taking these two humans back to Earth is that if this time matrix exists and the Skritna really do have it, they probably don't know what they have. But the second anyone even gets the idea of what it can do, this time traveling device, this war with the Yeerks could be over in split seconds. The Yeerks could go back in time and crush the first hoof, four-legged amphibian that crawled out of the Andalite homeworld pool. If the Yeerks or anyone who is invested in this war gets a hold of the time matrix, they could just wipe out the entire other species of Andalites or Yeerks. And so the Andalites, especially these two Arists and War Prince Alaron, feel that there can't be anything more important than going after this time matrix, capturing it, and putting it in the good guys' hands, quote-unquote good guys, the Andalites.
Yeah, so that's not exactly the place where you'd want a vacation, in particular.
No, it's a horrible hellhole stuffed with these creatures that eat each other and everything around them if they even slightly get hungry, which they're always hungry.
They might have said why they didn't do this, but I wonder why they didn't immediately call for backup instead of just 3 Andalites going in there.
Well, because they were out of range. the fighter that they're in, even though it's not a normal, short range fighter, the dome ship was preparing to meet them in some far off part of the galaxy. So they're supposed to rendezvous with the main dome ship, but they can't, shoot any kind of message across 3 arms of the galaxy. They just don't have the technology to do that. So it's really either they go back to the dome ship, regroup, and then try to find the time matrix, or just go after it right now, which I think
and it's such an important mission that they can't afford to give the Yeerks time to investigate all the cargo and, discover the time matrix.
Which, if you read the rest of this book, if they had tried to do that, then the Yeerks probably would have gotten their hands on it and figured out what it was.
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah. So they go to the Taxxon homeworld, and that's where the story really begins.
Well, and the way they manage to get there is by stunning a nearby Yeerk transport ship that they find just floating around the atmosphere out there. And they manage to board it and fight off some Taxxon controllers. And I think this is the first point in the series where you get to see them. And this is also when Elfangor has his first combat freak out.
Yeah, it's a nice nice contrast to. We saw Elfangor thinking too much and trying to fight his trainer and learn how to be a real warrior with blade tail fighting. And this is his first instance of fighting someone who's trying to kill him. And he just slips into pure instinct mode and scares both Alaran and Arbron in just how quick and deadly he can be.
Yeah, and he's just, he goes overboard killing some Hork-Bajir, where he's just got him on the ground, stabbing them. They're already dead. And he just kind of looks like a psychopath at this point.
Which sounds like when Anakin goes to rescue his mom.
Yeah,
he just destroys the entire village.
And it
Taxxons.
It gives us a little bit of a flawed protagonist, or it makes him out to be a badass for the most part, but also it's he kind of comes off like a psychopath, like he can't control what he's doing, whether that's through fear or just some kind of Anakin Skywalker-like anger.
I think it's just trying to show that, when he's got his back against the wall and he's in a pinch, he's going to do what he has to do to, survive.
Exactly. We do now that they have the transport ship that actually has some, Yeerk transport codes or whatever will get them onto the planet, they start descending and seeing if this plan will even work.
Well, and more importantly, this is also when they both get their first Taxxon morph, and Elfangor specifically mentions that he's only tried one other morph before, which was this Kahit bird or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's his only experience with the morph so far, and now he's got to do Taxxon. Probably one of the worst morphs ever. Besides Ant.
Another pretty important thing that happens before they actually land on the planet proper is you have this kind of moral argument between Alaran and Elfangor about the fact that this transport ship, what it's transporting, its cargo, is a bunch of helpless, blind Yeerks in their natural habitat. And Alaran is like, oh, sweet, the enemy, let's dump them into space. And Elfangor disagrees with mass innocent murder.
Right, yeah. He's not a fan of genocide, that Elfangor.
This is tough. I think I tried to put myself in Elfangor's shoes for this, and I can't honestly say that I could make a decision one way or another. Because on one hand, you have this evil race of jerk Yeerks.
Jerk Yeerk! My new t-shirt.
You have this evil race of jerk Yeerks that takes over the mind of any other race and then uses it for its own gain. So you have the opportunity to prevent more of those Yeerks from contributing to the Yeerk Empire. On the other hand, it is mass genocide, and they're defenseless, and there's nothing they can do to prevent being thrown out in space. So it's
Well-
definitely quite an interesting moral dilemma.
First off, let's all stop throwing around the word genocide, because they're not wiping out the Yeerk race here. They're just,
All right.
mass murder. That's
Okay. mass
Xenocide
murder.
is working. Is wiping out the Yeerk race.
Yeah.
Genocide is just killing a large number of them.
No, genocide would be race, like, xenocide would be, yes, it would be wiping out a alien race, but genocide still implies that you're killing off a culture or a, different race of beings. So
Maybe this group of Yeerks had a subculture.
They were a tightly knit clique.
yeah, maybe they're being transported because they're the last of their breed or something. But
Right.
anyway, picture it like, okay, you're in a truck. You have, for some reason, you're driving this truck full of Nazi soldiers who are asleep in the back. And,
I dump them into space.
and they're driving to reinforce, the front line that's killing, like, American soldiers or something. So you're driving this truck. These guys are 100% going to kill Americans when they get to their destination. I mean, do you drive the truck off the road and jump out, or...
Well, in this hypothetical, I feel like if I was driving a truck of Nazi soldiers that are sleeping in the back, that I would also be a Nazi soldier. So
No, you're an
I
American soldier. That's the
No,
that's
it's
the point of
the
ethical
same
question.
situation as in the book.
Yeah.
You've infiltrated this truck.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
And you have the ability.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough. I'm not pro murdering. Period.
Well,
really.
it's not murder. It's war. I mean, you could make an argument for that being murder, but this isn't like the Iraq War where it's like kind of we're the bad guys. We're talking about, people who are going to kill, American citizens during a time where they are trying to take over the world and be, for lack of a better term, evil. Mitch, what would you do?
I'd kill them. Sure. It's wartime. That or I guess, I don't know. Maybe I'd just leave them. Because you wouldn't want to mess with the ship too much.
I guess the Elfangor way of dealing with it could be to take something out of the engine and leave the truck on the side of the road so they can't get to where they're going. Maybe that would be a compromise.
You
But at the
would
same
think
time-
that they would be able to, if they ejected this container of yours, you'd think some sort of computer system they have would be able to pick it up.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're going to reinforce a side that is trying to kill people on your side. Aileron makes a pretty clear point that, hey, you're a kid, you've never been to war, there's a certain number of enemy troops, and there's a certain number of your allied troops, and the bigger number is going to have an advantage. So why wouldn't you do anything possible to give your side the advantage if you believe in your cause?
Yeah, but Elfangor doesn't really get behind this whole movement.
Yeah.
And they gloss over it for now. But this is where we have Elfangor and crew and co. leaving Lauren with just a single gun to deal with Chapman, because obviously at this point they trust her more than him.
If he raises any shit.
Yeah, feel free to shoot. Shoot to kill.
And then, so yeah, they leave Lauren behind and Chapman to fend for themselves on this ship in the middle of space, and they take the transport and finally descend into the atmosphere of the Taxxon homeworld.
Which is just a shithole.
It really is. It's not a fun place. I picture like work camps and like minery equipment, and like this is the entire planet, like a dust bowl, terrible spaceport, Tatooine-esque.
Yeah, but with like just random buildings.
Like warehouses and stuff. Yeah, it just...
Well, like the District 9 almost.
Yeah, that actually is a good description of, or District 9 is a good description, I guess, of what I thought of.
Like slums and...
Yeah, like little, just patched together shacks.
I was surprised at first because I thought you were making a Hunger Games reference with District 9. I was like, Mitch hates the Hunger Games. Why would he make that reference?
No. The good District 9, Coleman.
Whoa, shots fired. My gosh.
Pew! Pew pew pew! Draken shots.
So yeah, it's not a good planet. It's the terror of the universe. This planet and the inhabitants, these Taxxons, they're just vile. Everything about them is vile. They're the only race to, as a group, decide to give up their freedom for a slightly easier lifestyle controlled by Yeerks. It's pretty messed up.
Sounds like a fun time.
Yeah. So they just...
Yeah.
they need to find the time matrix. It's somewhere in the spaceport, which is vast. It's not even like city size. They said from horizon to horizon is the city, this spaceport.
Oh, see, I was picturing it kind of small, but yeah, that's huge.
No, they said
And I like how as soon as they land there, the very first thing that happens is they get separated.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's for a great. If you haven't read this series before, if you're Nate in this scenario, you get to immediately get the characteristics of a Taxxon, where they land, they get out, they're morphed as Taxxons, and there's what is there, an accident? Somebody's being punished.
No,
What is it?
A heavy load of cargo drops from a crane and like crushes. Or no, wait, doesn't a Taxxon fall off a tower or something?
There's some reason that a Taxxon is up above the other ones, and then it falls and kind of splats on the ground, and then all the other ones come in and go after it and start nom-nomming it.
It's a feeding frenzy, yeah. And this is where everyone is scattered and split up, basically.
Yeah, so in this chaos of feeding, all three of them are Taxxons. You can barely tell Taxxons apart, and they're all three motivated by pure, incredibly strong instinct to go towards this dying, destroyed Taxxon and feed off of them, just like all the other Taxxons. So in that chaos, obviously it's pandemonium, can't see each other, and somehow Elfangor just pushes himself away. He doesn't want to eat. He doesn't want to, go into this cannibalistic frenzy, and he actually backs away. He has that much willpower to get out of it.
Yeah, he got out of it pretty easy.
Yeah.
As we find out, not such the case for Arboron.
Or alluded to Aileron either. It's possible he was right up in there.
He's over there willingly going down. He's like, well, I am hungry.
Better stay strong.
Better than grass.
Yeah, but obviously this is Elfangor's mistake, because a Taxxon not feeding on a ready food source is the biggest conspicuous thing you could do on the Taxxon homeworld.
Oh, it's a tell, yeah. And this is especially troubling as he immediately runs into Subvisor 7.
With a group of Hork-Bajir, probably like elite warriors surrounding him.
They get karate gis.
And Subvisor 7 is he's in a Hork-Bajir body as well, right?
Yeah. Because that's like the most powerful one they've got thus far.
Pretty much. Oh, is that slam against the Jed? Is that what you're doing?
Definitely.
So they're obviously this Taxxon didn't feed. They're suspicious, and they go after him, surround him, and confront him, and assume right away almost that he's an Andalite morph.
Yeah, it's not a whole lot of guessing here. They know pretty well what he is, and they capture him immediately. And since Elfangor is obviously going to refuse to become his host body, which he asks him for politely. He's like, hey, cut your deal. Be my host body. And he's like, well, no.
This Subvisor 7 is pretty obsessed with the idea of having an Andalite host body.
Yeah, it's the centaurs really do it for him.
He's into that sort of thing.
He wants to frolic and gallop across the landscape.
Yeah, and in the first of many just dumb moves on Subvisor 7, he allows Elfangor to basically jump from this monorail that they're all on and, get to a place where he could morph out and morph into something else.
It's your classic Return of the Jedi problem where they're taking him out to the Taxxon Mound or Sarlacc Pit. And they think it's going to go really well where they're going to push him in there and then, he's dead.
I don't remember any Ewoks in this scene. So I don't know what you're Return of the Jedi.
Not quite the case here.
Yeah, he gets out of it almost immediately just by morphing into something else, which you think...
Yeah, he morphs into the Kafit bird. That's what it's called.
Yeah, that you mentioned earlier. One of his first morphs, which... And
then he just flies right back to the spaceport. So this was a little detour.
Yeah, another interesting thing about this is the fact that he says he's only morphed this once. So they actually... I think I compared it to this in an earlier episode with Axe, but the fact that all Andalites see morphing technology as a flat-out weapon. It's like putting your finger on the trigger of a loaded gun. So,
oh yeah, that's a very good point. They don't think of, practical application of this.
Or morphing for fun. That's just non-existent to the Andalites.
Right, yeah, they would never do it without purpose.
So he's only morphed this bird thing once, so he's just trying to figure out how to fly when he when he gets back into it. But it takes him back to the main section of the spaceport that he came in originally, and he starts looking for the Skritna ship because he assumes that Aileron and Arbron, they have no other point of reference, so they're probably all heading towards that direction.
Yeah, that's what you would think, until he actually arrives at the spaceport and sees Aileron's ship, the Jahar, landing. And he's like, WTF?
And, of course, Chapman overpowered this teenage girl somehow.
Yeah, I don't know how he managed to subdue her with her, I believe she had a Dracon beam.
Lauren, look over there!
Or a stunner, a generic stunner.
I'm sure she didn't seem like the brightest kid who's ever been captured by aliens. So
I don't know, man. Later when she's nailing softballs at Visor 3 and his goons, she seemed like a fighter to me.
Spoilers.
Well, yeah, so anyway, Chapman, in your typical debaggy Chapman fashion, is there with Lauren hostage and tied up and claims that he's going to trade the humans of planet Earth to the Yeerks. And we're all like, oh no!
Just a real dick move. I mean, it's not even a matter of like, hey, I'll give you this girl for, my freedom. He's like, oh, so there's this human race, probably the best host bodies you could ever have. I'll just like totally tell you where they are, if you want.
Yeah, no, he's very much like, I'll give them to you.
I thought this was really interesting that he would offer to tell the Yeerks where Earth was and how to take the humans and so they could become controllers. But what I don't know why he would do that, because what's to prevent them from just saying, oh, okay, tell us, and then they just take him right there and then just like siphon the information out of his brain.
Well, at this point in the series, he would be a valuable host body for them too, because he would be the first human host.
Well, that's my
so
point.
Far. So they would gain a lot of information just from him.
Why don't they just do that?
Yeah, Nate's saying, why even bargain?
Yeah, exactly.
You could just take them.
Oh, I don't know, because the plot deems it necessary.
I think maybe. He is still holding a weapon, so I'm sure none of them want to get shot. They could probably overpower him pretty easily, but...
Well, it's another thing where this is a new alien that they have no idea what he's capable of, and yeah, sure, he looks goofy on his two legs, but, maybe he's got a hidden third appendage.
Plus, maybe it doesn't bring it up in this book so much, Nate, but we have seen that if you volunteer to be a host for a Yeerk, it is much easier to work with that brain than it is if they're fighting all the time internally. So you could make a semi-argument maybe for if they force it on him, he could possibly, with a vast amount of willpower, keep that information from them. And it would just be much easier just to listen to him for 5 seconds.
Okay. All right. That's works for me.
So Elfinger's seeing this whole situation unfold in just the worst possible way.
Interesting point. This is the end of part 1.
Oh, really? Okay. Fair enough. A little cliffhanger.
Immediately after Chapman says, I've got a whole planet of that to trade you. Yeah, that's the end of part 1.
Wink.
He can't even bargain with anything else first, like tell them about like Saturn or something, and maybe not give out the whole human race right away. But
I don't know. Saturn puts them in the neighborhood. You might as well just tell them about Earth.
Yeah.
Right then and there.
But okay, where's the hard line? So he says, I can give you a whole planet of that, and then we go into part 2, essentially, right?
Yeah, and this starts out with Elfingor kind of traveling through the Taxxon city, just sort of recapping what he's just seen, and the fact that he'd been split from Arboron and his team, and the fact that Chapman just showed up offering, Lauren and the human race. And he pretty much runs straight into Arboron, who is still suspiciously in Taxxon morph and kind of acting really strange. He's got some weird dialogue segments
and
here.
And he runs into him at the Skritna ship. He finds the Skritna ship. He kind of leaves the humans to fend for themselves for a little bit, because he's still after the Time Matrix. So, That's where he finds Arbron. When he actually finds the Skritna ship, Arbron's nearby.
Yeah, basically, because immediately after meeting, even though Arbron's acting a little weird, he's still all about doing the mission. And that's when they go ahead and board the ship and take out its crew by Elfangor demorphs quickly, because he doesn't want to fight in Taxxon form. It's kind of useless.
Yeah.
So he demorphs, but suspiciously again, Arbron does not. And right then, we've got this scene where Elfangor is basically coming to terms with learning that Arbron is now trapped in Taxxon morph. It's a pretty traumatic situation.
Just the worst thing you could ever get trapped as.
Basically.
And this leads into kind of an action scene, right? With them speeding the Skritna ship away, trying to just,
Yeah, this was kind of neat, I thought, because it's like this super high-speed chase where they are literally like flying across the planet, just making huge shockwaves in their path. And this is where Arbron, gets to show off his piloting skills and his weaponry skills by destroying these bug fighters that are pursuing him. And, it's an action scene.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird trait they gave him earlier in the book, and now they're showing that he's, like, really precise with, I guess calculating the fighters' weapon systems.
Well, also the fact that the ship that they're in, the Skritna ship, was made for Taxxon hands, I believe. Or Taxxon hands make it easier to operate or something like that. So, yeah, he's good at the controls.
Yeah. So, they get away, though. They blow up these bug fighters coming after them. And he immediately, Arbron, not Elfangor, he starts kind of goading Elfangor to fight him or to get in, just try to basically goad him to take him out because he doesn't want to exist as a Taxxon. An Andalite trapped as a Taxxon. That's just like their worst fear.
Right, yeah. He goes, as soon as they're, out of immediate danger and into safety, he goes into the suicide mode pretty quick.
Which one? How's that resolve?
Oh, well, he eventually goes mad and tries to convince Elfangor that he needs to kill him or he's going to try and eat him, which he affectionately does go to eat him.
Affectionately?
Yes, it's very affectionate. Give me a hug! And Elfangor's like, no, and just really easily takes off a couple of his legs.
Which grow back, which we find out. This feels like Kay Applegate writing herself into a little corner. She's like writing this, and she's like, "Okay, he cuts off some legs. Oh wait, that's really sad." No,
I think she
back.
just couldn't have Arbron crippled for the rest of the series.
She would do that. That's totally her.
Maybe. Well, for the time being, yes, he is crippled, but he still manages to kind of trick or goad Elfangor into pulling out a Dracon beam, and he takes a shot, but he misses, of course. He's no
Arbron.
Not quite.
Yeah.
And part of that, too, wasn't there a comment that the intensity dial is reversed, and so when he's talking to Elfangor, that he says, "Oh yeah, on this model of the Dracon beam, high is actually low and low is high, so you have to crank it up all the way."
Yeah, this is how he tricks him to trying to kill him instead of just stunning and knocking him out.
Yeah,
not the cleverest of tricks.
No. Yeah, and Elfangor, they kind of play him up as obviously he's brave and he's a really good fighter, but he's almost like, "Oh wow, thanks for telling me, bro," and he almost like does it.
yeah, exactly. He ends up missing here, and I thought that part of him missing Arbron here had to do with the Ellimist again, kind of pulling some strings and maybe altering a couple details.
Yeah, he kind of says that he at the last minute figured it out, but he is already in the muscle movement of doing it. So you could make an argument for the Ellimist just sitting there shaking his head, being like, "Oh gosh, don't shoot him."
Yeah, no, don't fall for that. You're gonna fall for that.
Why did I pick this guy?
I know I'm all-knowing and all-seeing, but come on. You should have seen that too.
Help me out.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't go so well for either of them really, because as he misses Arboron, the Draken beam strikes the computer console, the control console for the spaceship. So of course they have to do their obligatory crash scene.
Yeah, and Elfinger gets knocked out, of course, because that's how they move forward in time.
That's how you advance a scene.
Yeah.
It's writing 101.
Yeah.
You ever need to advance a scene, just knock that character the hell out.
Yeah, exactly. And he wakes up, Arboron's gone, there's some Taxxon tracks leading away. It looks like Arboron might have gotten dragged away by other Taxxons or something, so he's probably dead.
This book is literally just one bad situation to another.
Well, that's Taxxon homeworld. Just don't go there.
Bad stuff happens on the Taxxon homeworld.
Yeah, so he has no way to get back. They've already traveled hundreds of miles, probably, from the spaceport.
I hear it's entirely controlled by Republicans.
I'm a Republican.
Case in point.
A moderate Republican.
Oh, but yeah, by the way, this is when he wakes up later and finds all this neat stuff. This is where he's searching the ship's cargo hold to kind of get more information. And, of course, he finds the time matrix there, but there's a lot of other cool stuff from Earth, including, but not limited to, a neat car that is going to come into play
Mustang,
here.
Specifically, which he kind of figures out what it is pretty quickly, kind of surprisingly quickly. He's like, oh, this must be some kind of transport vehicle. I guess you see wheels on something, even Andalites who have been flying for the past 1,000 years, probably.
Yeah, and he mentioned that he thought it was funny that it had wheels.
Yeah.
I think. Did this come to mind for you? So when they described the time matrix, it's basically just a big white ball. Did you immediately think the time matrix might just possibly be an alternate Gantz ball?
Yeah, reverse Gantz ball. No, because I always pictured it as, and I'm trying to figure out, because I know what I can reference that is similar to in my mind, but okay. Have you guys ever seen Star Trek IV, the movie, with the humpback whales?
No.
Basically, I pictured this giant ball with, almost looks like the pattern of your brain, like all these little crevices and like pebbles-looking surface, even though it's not described like that at all in the book. That's what I pictured, like this, this glowing, kind of pebbly ball, and it's just like almost looks like a brain substance thing. I don't know why I pictured that. That's just what I always thought it was. Even
I guess I have no clear image of what the time matrix ever looked like. I could never remember. I don't remember it being described as a white ball, though. I'll tell you that.
I thought of like this perfectly white sphere, kind of pearl-esque, and pearls aren't necessarily perfect, but
yeah.
And it just kind of had this slight glowing illumination to it, but perfectly spherical and almost perfectly white.
You know what would have been cool if it was described as a like, obviously there would be something there, but like if you couldn't tell what was there, like if it was a void kind of in space, like a sphere of just nothing, that would kind of make sense with the time travel and being some kind of ethereal device. That would be kind of cool, but that's not described as all, so I don't even know why I brought it up.
Because you love wasting time.
Yeah. So anyway, Time Matrix is there. There's a Mustang.
Well, yeah, he's feeling somewhat decent about his situation now that he's got the Time Matrix. He still doesn't want to use it because he is afraid, and
he's afraid specifically of the Elemis. It's like a childhood, like not Santa Claus. No one's afraid of Santa Claus, but like a childhood boogeyman.
The perfect analogy. It's like finding the puzzle box thing from Hellraiser.
Yeah.
Knowing what it does, but being like, oh, I don't want to touch that. I'm not going to summon Hellraiser.
Eternal pain and pleasure. Yeah, don't summon Hellraiser. That's really what this podcast is trying to get across to our listeners.
It's not going to be a good time.
It's not worth it, man. But yeah, something, basically, he's just afraid of messing with forces too big for him.
Right, so he bides his time. He waits until the Taxxon sun comes up, and this is when he discovers the Taxxon tracks and kind of realizes which direction he needs to head in. And then he starts thinking about how he's going to modify this Mustang to go look for Taxxons. And I thought this was one of the coolest scenes in the book, where he's taken out the seats inside the Mustang, and now he's driving it across this Taxxon homeworld, sipping Dr. Pepper from a little
In his
pan.
Yeah, like a little paint can or something. But
I imagine it like a little saucer,
yeah,
like a pie tin.
But it is weird. You know, it's playing with our human perspective, being like, oh yeah, he's in a Mustang on an alien planet. It's cool imagery if you think about it. It'd be really weird if it was adapted into like a movie or a TV show, seeing this scene.
Well, I imagine just he would kind of sit on his rump with his hind legs.
No, he stands. He's standing in it. He takes the seats out and he stands in it.
I would think he'd be hunched down a little bit.
I don't know. They don't sit very often. Andalites stand a lot.
No, they don't.
You stand a lot.
Actually, we just talked about how he sits a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I prefer sitting, remember?
No, Mitch does. Whatever. This is the worst distraction ever.
Worst tangent.
He's driving along in this Mustang, progressing the plot as he goes.
Oh, it's awesome because he's driving around and he figures out how to work the stereo, and there's music references, and it's just a good time. I mean, for a book that's been pretty dark and not disappointing, but depressing thus far, this is a nice little quirky, upbeat sort of comedic relief moment.
Yeah,
That's fair. It's definitely lighthearted.
yeah, and
it doesn't last long. I mean, he crashes pretty quickly.
yeah, we did need a scene like that, especially after the whole Arbron reveal of being trapped in one of the worst bodies ever, and his life's over, and ugh. So yeah, a little lighthearted scene like this, nice, good setup. Well,
I just wish he had like sunglasses that he pulled out of the center console and put a pair on his face.
Like
and then he
two
put
sets?
a pair on his stock eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be funny. But as you said, he is almost immediately just kidnapped. The ground opens up in front of him, and
Well, yeah, and that's part of this this new sort of character we're introduced to eventually. I think it kind of, knew where he was and opened up his specific point for him to fall in.
yeah, and he goes into this tunnel that leads to this mountain, which is described as a living hive with Taxxons who aren't hosts of the Yerks.
Yeah, this is where he once again meets up with Arbron, who is kind of like, hey, I've joined up with this here living hive, and it sort of is it's basically like the queen from the Ender series,
Or aliens or something, yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think this is the normal state of Taxxons? Like before the Yerks showed up, do you think it was just these colonies all over the planet with a bunch of Taxxons surrounded by this living mountain or whatever controlling them?
Yeah, this living hive thing, maybe. I mean, it seems like they could be more ant-like, I guess.
Yeah.
At least in the way they live. Maybe not in terms of like their intelligence.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah, for what it's worth, that's exactly what I thought. That this is kind of their natural state, and they've managed to elude the Yerks, and this is just how they be.
This is just them doing them.
Look, you do you. All right, you do you. And I'll do me.
We're gonna do we. Right. And despite, just how little sense it makes, Arbron's convinced. He's like, now that I'm here to lead them, we're going to attack the spaceport tomorrow. And Elfingor's like, why?
I'm with Elfinger. This seems super rushed. It's like now
Yep.
there's like a Civil War subplot, and like we're getting into this quick.
Well, it was primarily because of Arbron being an Andalite in Taxxon Morph is there to sympathize with the Taxxon cause.
And I guess that gave the Living Hive a reason to stage an attack. It gave them more, I guess, just another resource, and maybe made them make a decision to finally, go after the spaceport and try to hurt the Yerks or somewhat.
I think the Living Hive has assimilated some of Arberon's suicidal tendencies now.
Tenaciousness.
And and so now it's just like, fuck it, suicide mission.
I want to be an Andalite again, said the living hive.
Get that living hive some morphing power.
So Elfinger's just like, all right, what are we doing? Sure. Okay, I'll be a part of it.
Yeah, he tries to convince him, not to, but that's not going to work at this point. And Elfingor actually spends the night down there in the tunnel, which just sounds like a fun time.
Terrifying.
And then this is when Arberon comes back out and tells Elfingor that they moved his vehicle to a tube that's going to take him back to the spaceport. And that's where he heads. So Elfingor's driving his cool Mustang down this living hive tunnel that leads him back out eventually to the spaceport. And it literally takes him exactly back to where he needs to go, because he pops out of the ground and he's like back at the Jahar, and there's all these Taxxons and Hork-Bajirs that are like rushing the ship, and he manages to somehow fight his way aboard. And this is when Subvisor 7 shows up again.
When Subvisor 7 shows up, he doesn't show up alone. He actually brings some hardcore-looking Hork-Bajir. From at least Elfinger's perspective, this is like more muscle-bound. This is the Arnold Schwarzenegger of Hork-Bajir following him. And
right.
And yeah, it's either fight him or die immediately and have the human race captured and benefiting the Yeerk Empire. Not to mention the whole time matrix thing.
Yeah. It seems like it's not going too well until Aileron shows up in his own Hork-Bajir morph, which is kind of cool. I wasn't really expecting it.
Well, he was following with Subvisor 7, right? And then he just turns and starts fighting them?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So, kind of a neat moment. And this is where they manage to capture Subvisor 7 and board the Jahar again and leave Arberon behind.
By his own will. I mean,
he decides to stay behind.
And he forces Elfinger. He tells him right here, don't tell anyone what happened to me. I died in battle.
Right, yeah, and Elfingor's like, oh no, come back with us. We'll find a way to...
We'll make a nice little Taxxon scoop for you on the Andalite homeworld, and everyone will love you.
You'll be like our mascot. Our disgusting, horrible mascot.
Ugh. Just looking at you. Ugh. But they get away. They somehow, in this huge battle of Taxxon on Taxxons and free Taxxons and Civil War and Subvisors on Hork-Bajir elite warriors all fighting, they make it exactly to the ship they want to make it to and get out. Amazingly. I'm really trying to pinpoint how insane and possible this one point is and how they buy into it.
It's pretty dicey, but they explain it in a way that, I mean, it makes perfect and total sense.
Yeah, later
I just ate it up.
You ate it up.
So what happens on the ship?
We get right back into Aileron once again being kind of a dick, and he's like, "Oh no, we've got unfinished business. We gotta finish off those Yeerks on the transport ship." If you recall.
Yeah, and Elfinger is so against the killing of Yeerks, which obviously we can sympathize with him. It is murder, because these should be like prisoners of war, if anything. So Aileron, obviously, with his sordid past, which does that go into it here at all? Do you remember if it does? Doesn't he explain a little more?
Soon.
Okay. So obviously Aileron has war experience, and he knows that this is a deadly force, but Elfinger's not about to make that big of an ethical drop, and he's just not ready for it. He's not ready for the realities of war, and he goes so far as to turn against his commanding officer, Aileron, and stuns him with the help of the humans.
Well, yeah, Chapman kind of plays a big part of that, because as soon as he becomes involved or involves himself in this, things aren't going to turn out very well for whoever's siding with Chapman.
Their first mission after stunning Aileron, he's laying on the floor over there. Lauren comes up and she kind of comforts Elfangor. They're getting a little touchy-feely, this two alien races. This book's going in a totally different but saucy direction. they have to go back and get the time matrix because, Elfinger left it in the desert for anyone to find.
Yeah, it's pretty important.
And this is where things start connecting in Elfinger's brain. It's like, you know what? It was maybe a little too easy getting out of that spaceport. And
right, yeah, and this occurs when he actually goes. They found the time matrix. I mean, he's stepped outside the ship and he's confirmed that it's still there and it's all right and it's intact. And then there's this big reveal when he turns around and someone who we thought was a good guy is revealed not to be so.
Who?
Everyone. Lauren, Chapman, Halloran, everybody.
Yeah, they had Yeerks. Of course. I mean,
they're all
the
controllers.
humans were left with, it's like Nate said earlier. The humans were left with the Yeerks, and they had no, real bargaining chips or reason for the Yeerks not to take them. So of course they would be controllers at this point. I mean, it's crazy, and he just assumed the best, and really led to this part right here where Subvisor 7 has kind of dropped his Hork-Bajir body and jumped into Alaron, the first Andalite controller.
Yeah, he's pretty super psyched about it too.
He's super pumped. He has like a 7-foot-long Andalite erection in the scene. He is pumped to take over that body. That bod.
He wants his bod. Pretty bad. Yeah. And, surprisingly, Elfingor manages to come out ahead in the situation and stun the Subvisor 7 and regather the humans and kind of manages to trick the Yeerks into not pursuing him just long enough to be able to grab the time matrix and go.
Not only that, he actually tricks the Yeerks who show up, the bug fighters who've been following them. He tricks them to start shooting at Alaron, or I guess we should call him Visor 7 at this point.
Yes.
To
Subvisor 7.
To play around and faux hunt him, because the Yeerks and the bug fighters, they were told that an Andalite would be taken, but they can't tell the difference between two Andalites, so he pretends to be Subvisor 7 and tells them to play with Alaron/actual Subvisor 7.
Yeah, he tells them to make them run, which they do.
They do. Good old bug fighters, following commands from someone.
Right. Well, and now we've returned to space. It's Elfingor and just the two humans, and they've tied up Chapman. They're not taking any more chances with him. The little asshole.
And he's convinced. And he's convinced the Yeerk in Lauren's head to come out willingly. Otherwise, he'll starve him to death. From it, Nate. Did you? Okay, this is a good question for Nate, real quick.
Yeah.
Did this make sense? Did they go in? Do you know anything about how Yeerks eat or anything from reading this book?
Yeah, this was explained that there's some sort of magical sunshine rays that they eat on, or they feed on rather, and they have to come out of their host body every so often. I don't remember how often.
It's
that
like
was.
3 days, 3 Earth days.
Yeah.
Okay. They need to come out to feed, and if they don't, they basically starve.
Yeah, it's like a terrible, terrible death for them to starve to death, like worse than us. And it's basically like the rays of their home planet, which their sun is called like the Kandrona, and these Kandrona rays, which is just their sun's natural radiation, basically fills the pools that the Yeerks in their natural state live in, and that's what they feed off of, this radiation. So once they started taking host bodies and stuff like that, they had to always, every 3 days, return to their pools, suck up that radiation. So this Yeerk does not like the idea of starving to death, especially since he's already lost. Yeerks are very pragmatic that way. They don't fight when there's no reason to fight. And Elfinger convinces him that, hey, I'm not going to kill you immediately if you come out now. I'll just freeze you and keep you safe. Which his version of freezing...
It's a lie.
Which his version of keeping him safe is shooting him into a nearby sun.
Well, I mean, he ejects him into space, and what happens in space
stays in space.
Which he's got to do him, and he's got to let the Yeerk do the Yeerk.
This is my second note.
Or did the ship already sail on that joke?
No, that joke is always valid. This is my only second note that I wrote down, is that I'd love to see a future book where this Yeerk didn't go into the sun. He's been frozen for like 50 years, and he becomes this huge villain that comes out of space, pissed off because he was shot into a sun, and he comes back into the series. That would be an amazing book.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
I think.
Why stop at 50 years? Why don't we make it like 500 years?
Yeah, like some future Earth. There's Andalites and humans living together, and then this Yeerk descends in a ship. Where is Elfangor?
And there are no more Yorks.
There's no more Yorks.
Through one mean or another. I mean, there's no more Yeerks. So this is the last Yeerk. And then, like in Doctor Who, somehow he breeds 1,000 other Yeerks, and there's billions of Daleks.
And then it's an entirely overcomplicated plot.
It has been established, for your frame of reference, Nate, that a Yeerk can gain the morphing power, turn into something that can then turn into a Yeerk, and then enter a Yeerk. So you could have just an entire line of Yeerks inside each other. You could have like 1 billion Yeerks, all morphed into Yeerks, controlling Yeerks.
It's so Inception.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So with the Yeerk breeding, are there 3 different genders? Or are they all like...
They're kind of non-genderless.
We haven't gotten to that point in the series yet.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
It's not worth talking about here, I guess.
Not even get an answer then.
I wish I could go into it more and tell you which Yeerk species you should feel sexually attracted to, but I just don't have that information.
The answer is all of them.
Right.
So anyway, he shoots this Yeerk into the sun. He's done with that guy.
Yeah, and then that leaves our lovely, plucky heroes, Elfangor and Lauren, traveling through space together. And of course, they're getting in more bonding time, and it's all really great. I have a theory that, Katherine Applegate is probably really into centaurs herself. And so this whole story idea is like her really staking her claim on the centaur genre.
That makes a lot of this make sense.
It's like Twilight with centaurs.
Exactly. That's the way I thought of it.
I thought there was some weird stuff happening, and
she put herself into this story, and she was like, I am just going to live my centaur fantasy right here and now.
Yeah, well, to be fair, it's not really touched on when they first meet the humans, but more so when we get into this next big plot thing that's about to happen.
Yeah.
Lauren's really like, she's like the Animorphs age. She's like 13 or 12.
Yeah,
She's really young. For some reason, this entire book, I was reading them as like Chapman and her being like 17 and 18 for some reason.
Anyway, the point is, they're traveling through space, and Elfangor's got this plan to bring their ship out of Z space, and they should end up somewhere near this fleet of Andalite dome ships that they're super excited about.
Yeah, and their plan is basically, they know the Yeerks are following them because, this is the ship that the Yeerks were all over for, hours and hours. So they know it's probably bugged and has tracking devices or whatever. So Elfangor's plan is to get as close, go into light speed, get as close to the, or go to Z space, not light speed. Totally different sci-fi universe. Go into Z space and get as close to the dome ships as possible, which are these insanely powerful, and that's their carrier ships. That's their most powerful ships. So they could trick these Yeerks into going straight into fighting the biggest, most badass Andalite ships out there.
Yeah, it's basically a certain win scenario for them.
Yeah.
That's what they think.
Hoping that the Andalites don't blast this random Skritna ship out of nowhere.
Yeah, that too.
And
however, it goes quite differently for them.
It gets to a really weird point. I gotta say, I didn't even rereading this book, and I've read this book maybe 3 times. I don't remember this at all.
No, I don't remember this at all either. I assume it was kind of shoehorned in to just add some tension to the scene and to make things not work out for the heroes.
Actually, yeah. So I thought something was going to happen with the asteroids, and we were talking about the asteroids, right?
And nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is another example. I really think they had the writers of this book had an agenda to, just like with the rest of the series, just make space weird and alien and ununderstandable by humans. So like little events like this, introducing rock creatures, it's very reminiscent of trying to just make space like this dangerous alien place.
Well, yeah, it seems a lot like I want to say Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but where it falls short there is it's not quite as clever and as humorous as Hitchhiker's Guide would have done.
It's not trying to be humorous at all. They're getting eaten by rocks, and it's scary.
No, I know, but I mean, it's like random things happening, you know?
Yeah, it's just like going in the ocean. You know, you're scuba diving, and there's sharks, and you turn over a rock, and it's really a poisonous octopus, and what the hell, you know?
Yep, that's every trip to the beach of mine.
Damn these octopi!
Yeah, well, anyway, they're rock monsters in space, and they're attracted to energy, I guess. This particular form of energy that they're all shooting at each other.
Taking this out of the book, like separating it, this little point, it's kind of a cool little scene. It's almost like they had this idea and just put it in the book because they liked the idea. Like, this is a danger, like, oh shit, we're in this asteroid field, and they're attracted to energy. What do we gotta fight them off? You know, it's
right.
It's
yeah,
a cool little
it's
scene.
a very hectic, crazy scenario.
Yeah,
and it reminds me a lot of the new Star Trek remake, the first one.
Yeah,
where they come out of warp speed or whatever it is, and they're in the middle of that huge battle that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, this seems very much like it would be that same scenario.
I do not.
You don't?
I don't remember that at all.
Oh. Watch the movie again.
We can do nothing
Guess
for
I'll
you,
do.
son.
I've got the Blu-ray. I'll just have to pop it in when I get home.
There you go.
It also, I think it's a nice throwback to like Atomic Age sci-fi movies and TV shows as well. Like, there's always some kind of rock creature. Even Galaxy
definitely.
Quest with Tim Allen makes a joke about that. They go to that alien planet and there's a big rock creature.
Yeah.
Futurama has made fun of it multiple times as well.
I've been known to throw in a rock creature or two into some of my books.
Some say that's the sign of the best authors.
You gotta know when to add some sort of rock-like being into your story.
The trick is knowing when to do it.
That's right.
All the time, and then immediately disregard it to the overall plot. That's the trick.
Yeah. So these energy-eating rocks, energy-eating space rocks, manage to take out most of the Andalites and basically all the conflict immediately. And the way they solve this problem is by just shutting down their ship, so they're not drawing it in with their energy things anymore.
But even as they solve one problem, another problem zero spaces right in. The Yerks show up, and now they're being led by not Sub-Visor 7, but Visor 32. Same character, new title. And Visor 32 is pissed, because even though he's got his nice new Andalite body, he was still tricked by, an Arist. And he is wanting to capture them or kill them or whatever evil villains do in these scenarios.
Yeah, and Elfangor actually comes up with a plan to sort of use Lauren to trick this, the now Visor 32 into docking with his ship, only to kind of blast at it and cause this vacuum to, it's like a vacuum to space.
Yeah, and this only works because, as far as Visor 32 knows, Lauren is still a controller and has managed to trick everybody on board and take control of the ship. So,
yeah, a decent bit of. I mean, I thought this was a actually good idea.
Yeah, it's fairly clever.
And I don't see why they don't do that more in the future, with pretending to be Yerks.
Spoilers for Nate.
Disappoint.
Oh, well, I don't know. Shit, there might be.
There's plenty of instances in other books where they pretend to be controllers around other controllers, and sometimes pull it off.
Yeah. I mean, it happens.
Yeah. So after they are able to trick this, it's just them floating around inside their ship with no oxygen, dying slowly.
Yeah, and Elfangor and Lauren definitely have to work together here to sort of close the opening in the ship and to return the oxygen and everything. But quite obviously, that's all going to work out for them.
There's not enough oxygen.
This is where we've got...
I was just going to say, there's not enough oxygen. Once they close the doors, there's no onboard oxygen system anymore. And the only thing they have are the Visor uses the knowledge of his host body to know where these emergency oxygen containers are, but they only got like 5 minutes in each.
Right, and in Lauren's case,
it's not the right mix of chemicals.
Yeah, it's tailored to Andalite's
Mm-hmm.
biology, so she's not even breathing the right stuff technically.
And so the only thing they can do, according to the Visor, is work together to use the time matrix to get out of this situation. There's no other ship to attach to. The Andalite dome ship's, like 300,000 miles away, even though they can see it, but it has no power. They have no other way out of the scenario except what the Visor's telling them. But none of them even know how to use the time matrix, so they all could have died here pretty easily.
No, it's the classic gotta team up with my arch nemesis plotline.
Actually, considering how the Yeerks have been described thus far, I thought this was kind of cool that they have to work together. Because so far the Yeerks are only described as extremely evil and terrible and the worst thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And now, for survival's sake, they need to work together. I don't know. I just thought that was neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is showing a little more what we
Interesting.
learn. What we learn in other books is that, like I mentioned earlier, like the Yeerks super pragmatic. Like they will not, they'll team up with their worst enemy if it means they'll survive. They're very cowardice, and they have other layers than just being super evil villains. So yeah,
Which is great.
Yeah,
because
that's a good point.
and earlier I made the comparison to a Dalek, but they seem to be so much more than that.
Hey, Daleks have teamed up with the Doctor before.
Yeah, and Daleks are just dumb.
Yeah.
I don't like Daleks. Not a favorite villain.
You're
for
more
me.
of a Cyberman man.
I'm more of a silence kind of guy.
Whoa.
Oh, the new
Yeah.
Who.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the silence to me is by far the scariest Doctor Who villain.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
not
cool.
not the topic though. So let's.
No. You bring it up. I'm at least going to throw it out there that I think the Time Lords themselves are the scariest villain in Doctor Who.
Ooh,
But that's just me.
touche.
I don't know. The Slovene are pretty terrifying.
No, what are the oh gosh, the name is on the tip of my tongue. The little fat monsters made of fat.
Oh, the
Lampreys or
Oedipus.
adipose. The best
Those
villain.
are just adorable.
Oh, my own little
They're
adipose.
like little Stay Puft Marshmallow Men.
Yeah, and you get thinner when they kill you, so that's nice.
Hooray! Everybody wins, I guess.
So
Anyway.
after managing to come together and work out their differences and not try to kill each other for a little bit, Elfangor and the Visor work together and secure the time matrix, and then this begins this whole power struggle of who can figure out how to use it first.
And they
Where
all
they're both competing.
Yeah, and this is a Wizard of Oz moment where they're all like, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." But you've got three minds controlling this machine created by a god, and through however it works, they don't even try to touch on how this thing works without in the rest of the series or this book or anything. But
No, it's too complicated. We don't need to worry about it.
yeah, but so you have these three individuals trying to control it, saying basically, "I want to go home," and you hear a little chuckle, a little universal chuckle, from what assuming is the people who created this time matrix, and they are transported individually somewhere else. I don't even want to try to describe where it is.
Right. Well, it's basically a mishmash of dimensions here. It's kind of well, you'll find out.
They basically
It's a-
create like a pocket universe, for using the term that our listener loves.
Right.
They create a alternate pocket universe that shouldn't exist, but they force it into being.
Yeah, Elfangor, again, when you need to advance the plot, make him knock him out, because he wakes up in a
Yeah.
place that kind of resembles the Andalite homeworld, where, he's got his little scoop home, and for
Well,
some reason he thinks his parents will be there.
At first, he thinks it is the Andalite homeworld.
Yeah, I mean, it very much is his home world. Until he realizes that, there are parts of Earth and the Yeerk homeworld mixed in there as well. And it's all really patchy and just, it clearly does not look right. It's a
Now-
bizarre melding of the three worlds.
I do want to stop
Oh,
us
bizarro.
briefly. We're not going to talk about Doctor Who, but I do want to go to Nate and see, okay, again, you hear so many sci-fi concepts thrown at you throughout this book. Now we've created a pocket universe made of 3 different worlds, and this is where we are in the plot now. What's your first reaction reading this?
I'm digging it. I think it's really kind of a cool setup for this. Because, well, it makes sense that each being controlling the time matrix would want to go to their respective home. And I think it's so cool that the time matrix gives them what they ask for to the best of its abilities, and creates this combination bizarro world that it tries to mimic
Bizarro!
Their homes. I don't know. I thought it was really neat. I thought it was cool that it's not just like, oh, the Yerk zone is over here, the Earth zone is over here, and the Andalite homeworld zone is over here. They're all intermingled.
Yeah,
it's almost like a painting where they're just kind of blotchy and mixed in.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a very interesting concept. I'll definitely give him that.
Right, and after wandering around for long enough in his this strange little world, he meets up with Lauren again, and she's obviously in her Earth section of the world. And after a nice reunion for the two of them, they happen to run into Visor 32 again, and he has with him the strangest sounding aliens I think I've heard about. What are your opinions here on the wheel aliens?
I mean, yeah, they have biological wheels, which is, it's just saying that it's a cool concept, and it's I think it's almost too hard to picture, because going into their joints, I don't know, I couldn't even. I pride myself, being into the film industry and writing scripts and doing this. I pride myself in being able to visualize live action scenarios and how you would film something. I have no idea how I would picture this thing on film. I have no idea how it would work. I don't even know what it would look like. I don't know how it would play. And so bravo to them for blowing my mind.
So I agree with you, actually. However, it did not blow my mind. It actually started to lose me a little bit. Because a biological wheel is... I can't conceive how that would work.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
I have something to say here that I don't think either of you will have been aware of. So even though these aliens are described as having 4 wheels, which is kind of a weird alien design, it's not all that weird, because I wonder if this might just be a reference or a throwback to another book by Philip Pullman, and it's in his Dark Materials trilogy. You probably have heard of The Golden Compass. That's the first book in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the third book of the series, The Amber Spyglass, a large chunk of that plot has to deal with a character who finds herself on an alien world, surrounded by these alien creatures that are very similar to this description, where they have not biological wheels, but they have a biology set up so that they can use these seed-like pods as wheels for themselves. And their whole culture revolves around this weird obsession with these seeds. And I just wondered if somehow, some way out there, Applegate was making a reference to his Dark Materials.
But even if it's a really clever reference to some other book that did it really well, it still doesn't really change our main problem with it. In the fact that it's almost too hard to conceive of how this would work, like a joint system with these wheels. And even if it did work, it definitely wouldn't work as fast as these things move. I mean, they're moving like ATVs.
They don't move fast, though. She specifically mentions how they look like they might be fast, but they're actually quite slow.
Well, no, they kind of ramp up, and they're charging speed.
Yeah, she says once they get going, but they started out slow.
That's what I'm saying. I think they'd be these hobbled, handicapped creatures, moving, barely being able to go 5 miles an hour.
Well, that's not even the worst problem, is that these things are so overpowered in that even though Elfangor, slashes at him with his tail, they have the odd Hydra ability of being able to regenerate into completely new creatures.
And don't forget the part where they split apart, too.
So yeah, yes. And then to make things even weirder, not only do they split and, divide, they also divide amongst themselves into two other creatures, one of which has wings. So it's like, these are really, really weirdly overpowered aliens.
Yeah, I'll give them that.
Yeah.
They're super original. They're just almost too original. Like, we don't get it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Coleman. Too original is kind of a good way to put it.
Well, yeah, it seems like, okay, we've got humans. Well, what if also their arms opened up and they shot rockets out of them? Oh, cool. Well, what if, their legs were also jets? It's like...
Yeah, but I can conceive that. Like, you could implant stuff into their arms or I don't know.
Also, Mitch, you just totally described two of Visor 3's morphs in other parts of the series. So,
what is he? Does he morph into Astro Boy later?
No, remember in the at one point in the David trilogy, he turns into that giant creature that has like safety cones for arms, but it shoots them like missiles.
Oh, no, dude, I don't remember that. But Applegate must have been playing Shattered Realities a little too much.
Applegate was high throughout half the morphing alien creature creation.
I was kind of wondering that.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, this is a crappy situation to be in, and a crappy situation to read about, as it turns out. And Elfangor and Lauren decide, F it, we're just gonna escape. And so they run away to Lauren's house. And there's a whole scene there with Lauren's mom, who acts like it's totally normal that she's hanging out with an Andalite.
This is pretty funny. This is another moment of, it's frightening if you take it from Lauren's perspective, but it's also pretty funny that it's funny that
Axe's brother,
Elfangor. It's funny that he continues the conversation with the mom, and it's almost like he's just, he's being nice and having manners and.
Yeah, it's a good little scene, and this is where Lauren's having a lot of difficulty dealing with this situation, and they decide maybe to get out of her house, and they take a trip to McDonald's of all places. And as they're eating there, this is where Elfangor kind of realizes that the Time Matrix would probably be in the center of this spiral galaxy.
Yeah,
it turns into Gurren Lagann here for a second.
They've noticed as they've been walking around this pocket universe, or whatever they created, they've noticed that it does kind of have a pattern to it, and if you go all around it, it's kind of like this spiral that's coming to a point. So that's where Elfangor figures if the Time Matrix is anywhere, it's going to be in the middle.
Right. So that becomes the next X on the map that they have to head towards.
Also, a large part of this book, we talked about how much the Taxxon world sucks. I think we can mention the fact that part of the spiral is the Yerkholm planet, and it sucks way more.
Oh, yeah. No, it's definitely so much so that they make a point to go around the Yerk segments, whereas like they're cutting through Andalite and Earth segments of the world. But when they see a Yerk segment, they're like, nah, F that, man.
Well, and
there are... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, to be fair, part of what they're cutting around is that weird, slow tongue thing that comes out of the ground.
Yeah. There's definitely a Zelda villain in there somewhere.
No, I think Kay Applegate and Michael Grant were, like, deep into, like, StarCraft while they were writing this book.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of the Yerk stuff is, like,
Zergs.
Yeah. Which suck and are disgusting and, like, kill a lot of people. It seems like the Yerkholm planet would be a horrible place.
Yeah, and as they're wandering through this place and they're getting closer to the center of the universe, they start to rapidly age, which I guess is a way to get them out of the 13-year-old age range and quickly up into the 18 to 20-year-old age range.
Yeah.
So that the love story makes sense.
And Lauren alludes to her having gone through some changes.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Changes.
I wanted to point that out, that she comes very close to describing in detail what her exact changes are.
And then she's like, oh, never mind.
Oh, never mind. You'll see them later. You'll see them in part 3. Wink, wink. So yeah, they're growing hair, and Elfangor's hooves are growing, and Lauren's fingernails look like that African dude's.
And I appreciate the thought put into this. You can tell they were like, just the idea that the physics of this universe, as you get closer to this time matrix which created it. I mean, obviously, we can't even comprehend, besides the fact that it's a plot-driven story, the details of this universe and the time matrix and the Elimus and all of that. So it's kind of an interesting concept, and it doesn't feel shoehorned in that as they're getting to the center of this time machine that's built this universe around them, there are distortions, like temporal distortions in time, the closer they get to it. I thought the whole concept of that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. They fight their way through this vortex where they're rapidly aging, and they make it to the time matrix there as well. And as soon as they're inside it, it's like, all white, I guess.
Well, it's like a big storm that they head towards, like a big tornado or something. And once they get past this barrier, they enter it. Yeah.
Yeah, and as soon as they do, of course, the Visitor shows up with his wheelie goons.
Final
and
showdown.
There's another kind of pseudo fight showdown here, where you even get Lauren chipping in, and
Could we call it the final countdown?
the final countdown. Yeah, kind of, I guess. But everybody fights, and the Visitor ends up just running away like a little bitch. Really, he gives up pretty quickly. He doesn't do a whole lot.
Yeah, his dogs suck.
They've got wheels.
Yeah, wheels, not the best thing to bring to a fight.
Yeah, come on now.
You brought a wheel to a leg fight. Not a good move. So Elfangor's telling Lauren, to just take them back to Earth, because he really can't go back to his people at this point.
Take us to the place with the white cylinders that you put in your mouth and smile and be happy. Which, we didn't even go into that subplot, but I think we're okay without it.
No, that's right. Yeah, one of Elfangor's great Earth memories is a picture he found of somebody smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, cigarette.
I thought they were talking about marshmallows at first.
Oh, really? You confused the cylinder?
Yeah, I was like, cylinders, they must be camping and eating marshmallows.
I want to see that ad where they're just like sucking on marshmallows with a waterfall behind them and smiling.
I did realize later that it didn't really make sense, and thought, oh yeah, they must be smoking.
Well, yeah, because she immediately says something like, no, we're not going to put white cylinders in our mouth because smoking's bad for you.
Oh, yeah, that
like
must have been it.
There's a PSA hidden in there.
It wasn't me figuring it out. It was them blatantly telling me.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure as a kid, even with that blatant explaining, I didn't understand any of it when I was younger. So I was just like,
yeah, I think I remember being a little confused as to what that could be as well.
So they're both at the Time Matrix. Elfangor is kind of done with space. He's kind of done with this being a sci-fi story. And
right.
He's like, just picture Earth. Let's just, fuck it, let's go. Let's go to Earth.
Well, at this point, he realizes, he can't go back. I mean, he's done so much that would offend his people.
He created the first Andalite controller, and it was completely his fault. And he got away. Visitor 32, he's already been promoted. The Yeerks already know about it. Stories are probably spreading throughout the universe of the great Elfangor and, ruining everything.
Yeah. So obviously he's gonna be like, all right, Lauren, I'm with you. I'm just gonna go to Earth now and blend in. So he has her kind of picture a time right after she was abducted, so that they could return back to that point.
Which, this is kind of interesting. The Time Matrix is so much more than just a time machine. I mean, it's obviously from this point, them creating this universe or whatever, you can tell that. But it's time, place, space, whatever you want machine.
It's a plot matrix.
I thought of it as the TARDIS.
It's the TARDIS on crack.
Yeah, basically.
Kind of. And with less of a personal connection.
I wonder if it's bigger on the inside.
It's actually bigger on the outside.
No, that's pretty unimpressive, I guess.
Oh, yeah, and then shoehorned in here is the fact that Elfangor kind of explains away how they should just keep their older bodies.
Yeah.
Because remember, their bodies are still, rapidly aged. And I thought, if they're working with the Time Matrix, which can already do so much, why couldn't she just picture them
I'll tell you
back
why.
in their younger original bodies?
I'll tell you why. Because Elfinger liked what he saw.
Wink.
He's like, you could go back, or you could change the memories of everyone you know, so that you can keep them tits.
Right, exactly. I thought that. I mean, as a kid, yeah. It made
We need to
sense. I was
rephrase
like, okay,
that.
they're
I'm not going to leave that in. Hold on, we need to rephrase that.
That's fine.
No. I think. I actually don't have another explanation. That's totally the
That's
explanation.
okay. You don't need to go into detail on this. I was just going to say that
Okay.
I thought, with all the things that the Time Matrix could do, giving them their original bodies, Full Metal Alchemist style, would not be too difficult a task for it to do. Instead, they do this, no, we're going to keep the older bodies and kind of rewrite time to make it all make sense. Just so that I thought it wouldn't be as creepy with having them, go into this whole marriage subplot.
Yeah, but that could have easily been solved as well, just by having them be on Earth longer. I mean, they could have gone back as teenagers and then kind of grown up together. That kind of would have been a sweeter love story.
Aw.
Yeah, it kind of would, except that they would have needed a lot more time to do that.
It's a montage. That's
properly.
That's 2 pages.
But okay, I get your point. Because we get a time skip here of 3 years of Elfangor living on Earth and blending in with human society and staying in human morph and all of this stuff. I just can't help feeling that I want that in book form. That's what's interesting to me. But here we're
the day-to-day story of that 3 years.
Yeah, because when the other Andalite characters come into the main series, their attempts at blending in with human society is always a really funny point
hilarious.
Of the story.
Yeah.
And just to have a whole book on Elfangor, actually blending in and trying to become human, and I mean, I'm sure there's a fanfic out there somewhere of it.
I don't want to. Or go ahead, Nate.
Okay, he does recap that time a little bit.
Yeah, I know. And I just want more detail.
I
actually thought with that recap, is it okay to go here, Coleman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I thought with the recap that he kind of almost saw himself as better than humans.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Which was insulting to me as a human. I really would have liked if the perspective he took was, oh, humans are fascinating because of this, and it's really weird that they do this. I thought it was interesting that Elfangor kind of takes this approach where he's kind of thinks of himself as better than humans and far more knowledgeable. And granted, sure, he is. He talks, but he I don't know. He kind of takes that high and mighty approach and talks about how he understands all these advanced physics concepts that humans are just barely beginning to understand, and how he talked to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and how he told them about all these computer interfaces, and then they stole it, and blah, blah, blah. I think a more interesting approach would have been to have him observe humans and think, oh, it's interesting that they do this or that, or it's very peculiar that they do this or that, and kind of take a analytic approach rather than I'm better than these guys. I'll kind of hint at some stuff and they can take and do what they want with it.
Well, to his credit, that's not just Elfangor. That is the entirety of the Andalite race. Whenever any Andalite comes to Earth, they're always pompous and high and mighty like that.
Okay.
And for the most part, his brother character, Axe, who joins the main cast, his entire character arc is about him learning not to underestimate humans and learning what humanity is all about and eventually blending in with humanity.
Okay, yeah, I just thought it was interesting that was his approach when he's trying to blend in.
But
yeah,
here's the thing. I agree with Nate's frustration with this section because we've just seen this character. I'm sure he hasn't, we haven't seen as much of it, but he's been living on Earth now. His entire experience with Lauren and Chapman, for the most part, is him looking down on this race and then being continually surprised by them. So you would think some of that arrogance would edge off, especially once he started living with them proper on Earth. So it is frustrating that he goes straight back into Andalite mode of being arrogant and, that my race is better or whatever.
Well, I think it's because he feels so vulnerable. Like he says, he doesn't have his stalk eyes or his tail, which he really misses. And, he just feels cut off and very vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose that's a fair point.
So obviously, him and Lauren have shacked up over the 3 years and gotten married, and because of the age skip, that's not creepy. And this is when Elfangor's blending in on Earth. He mentions how he's taken a human name, Alan Fangor, or Al Fangor.
Clever.
I laughed. I giggled.
I chuckled.
And basically, he's living life and it's all good. As good as an Andalite trapped in human morph can be. But one day he comes home from work to just find this weird dude in his living room, and he knows kind of right away that it's an Elemist.
Because it's not just a dude, it's like a winged, floaty creature.
Well, no, he looks normal at first.
I thought it was...
No, it looks like a human.
Oh, okay, so he changes in the living room? Okay. I thought he's... Never mind, okay.
Yeah, eventually. They have a little chat, and the Elemist is able to convince Elfangor that he basically screwed everything up by doing what he did with the Time Matrix there, and by coming to Earth and, taking himself out of the fight against the Yeerks. And that he really needs to repair this damage done to the timeline by sending Elfangor back to the point where he should be. So basically, the Elemist comes in and offers to fix things. And now, this is something I wanted to know, if this is a plot point that you saw coming in particular, Nate, or if you were disappointed at all by this, of the sudden appearance of a godlike character who can set everything right.
As I mentioned earlier, I was kind of under the understanding that the Elemists were this previous race, that they were very advanced and very powerful, but they were no longer around. I didn't really think of them as a higher dimensional being that they are. So when we got to this part of the book, and I understood what the Elemists are, I actually thought it was really interesting that a higher dimensional being would feel the need to start poking around in lower dimensions.
Have we got a book series for you then?
Right.
And I think it was really kind of neat because they go on to talk a while, and I believe it's Elfangor that says, are we just a game to you? And the Elemist says, yeah, basically.
Oh, yeah. He's not even subtle about that.
I was like, oh, all right, well, we're the pawns of gods. Cool.
Basically.
And, well, see, yeah, and there are some issues with the series proper, with Deus Ex Machinas, especially when you start bringing in these godlike beings. I think this is less of a Deus Ex Machina than a lot of the other ones, because this doesn't fix anything. This ruins the main character's life.
Right, and it leads to his death, ultimately.
Yeah.
And you know what? I agree with you there. I didn't have as big a problem with this Deus Ex Machina ending as I think I would have, or that I used to.
Mm-hmm.
It made a lot more sense this time.
Yeah, and it's incredibly sad, too.
And the fact that, Elfangor's like, okay, so if I do this, does that mean we win? And the Elemist can't even give him that. He's like, well,
you might do okay.
If we do this, that means you have a shot at maybe winning.
If I feel like it.
Yeah. If I get off the couch and stop watching Planet Earth HD.
Yeah.
What I did think was interesting about the Elemist is that he reiterates several times that, oh yeah, we don't get involved. Well, clearly you do.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You can't say one thing and then do the exact opposite, Elemist. That's called a hypocrite.
Yeah. And I mean, this is why the Elemist is such a good character. Basically, Nate, for background, not a huge background, but I'm saying the Elemist and another godlike being who's, the dark side of this, is woven throughout the series. It's not always like huge turning events or anything, but usually it's there's always some big question or some ethical dilemma, and the Ellimist comes in and gives them a choice to do something, and it's always like this. You can tell that the Ellimist and this other character are playing just a big chess game with the universe. And to further give you background, within this Chronicles series, this is the Andalite Chronicles, there's a whole book that's the Ellimist Chronicles. And it's the Ellimist is the protagonist. And it's my favorite book in the entire series.
I think that would be really interesting.
It's
incredible.
We won't be reading it until almost the very end of our podcast.
Probably pretty close to
It's going to be one of the, I think maybe the second to the last.
At the pace we're going, it's probably going to be like a year from now when we read it.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, that should be maybe our second to the last episode. I don't know.
Such an incredible book, though.
Yeah, and I mean, the Ellimist clearly has the power to do whatever the hell he wants, because he is able to make Elfangor an Andalite again. He puts him back on the Andalite dome ship, He
puts him in a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I have here that he puts him back on the bridge of the dome ship that is under attack. He hops into a fighter, but he puts him back on the bridge of the dome ship, and that's where he, I think he has a little run-in with maybe his old captain or something, who's kind of confused. Obviously, since
I thought he was on the fighter, and that was over radio or something.
Oh,
over Thoughtspeak.
Yeah, I think he puts him in a fighter, and then he Thoughtspeak radios the dome ship, and he's like, "I'm here now," and they're like, "Oh,
and
shit,
they're like, what?
Help us!"
Right. You're here. What are you gonna do?
But this is basically the Ellimist transports him into a fighter and puts him in the middle of some random battle where he definitely shouldn't be. This is still years after when he left the universe to go live on Earth. So
yeah, but as he's zooming around space trying not to die, who shows up but the newly appointed Visor 3, who's just like, "Oh, Elfangor, I remember that dude. I hated him." And they proceed to have a snarky little conversation.
Yeah, and
which ends with, I thought this was pretty cool. I never realized this, never thought about this, but it ends with Elfangor deciding to ram the blade ship.
Very important to fans of the book series, especially if you've read the entire book series.
Nate's
pretty
nodding
amazing.
along like he thinks he
I
should
didn't know
get
there was
it.
significance here. I don't know. I thought it was cool.
The term specifically,
ram the
blade ship is
every time anyone says that,
the
shit goes down.
Know about.
I see.
So this is kind of where, he's crippled the blade ship, but he's also crippled himself, and he's he manages to survive, and somehow they don't really go into detail how he survives this whole incident, but he does, and is made a hero by the Andalites super quick. And this is where he admits to his captain basically everything that happened to him, except for the location of the Time Matrix, which he deems...
Can Elfangor go 2 seconds without creating a Heractolest? I mean, seriously, he's just dying to tell everybody all his faults. It's like, dude, get a My Journal or something.
Well, it's nice that she, Applegate, at least says that, now that he doesn't have Lauren to share his experiences with anymore, he's like, I gotta tell somebody. So, he unloads everything on this Andalite captain. And the captain is like, okay, cool, yeah. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cover all that up so that our Andalite race can have our perfect hero. And Elfangor just kind of, is shuffled back into the rank and file of the Andalite military, where he's this big hero.
Yeah, to his credit, I mean, he becomes a hero without... I mean, he does do some brave thing with ramming the blade ship, and he becomes a prince. But to his credit, after that, he becomes a real hero. He's actually like one of the greatest fighters in the universe. So it insinuates that throughout the war that follows in this little montage section, that he goes on to win tons of battles and command dome ships and do tons of stuff.
Yeah, he definitely becomes kind of a seasoned pro in a fairly short amount of time. I think he mentioned that he didn't even know his brother was born yet at one point in the story.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he must be a little bit older. Well, anyway, so he obviously goes back to the battlefield that is kind of Earth. Battlefield Earth. To find his dome ship is outnumbered.
Yeah, and he's got Aximili hanging out in the dome. He's brought his little brother to war to be an Arist himself. And that's a side note. That's not brought on, but no, he does talk about when the dome ship's overpowered, the blade ship shows up, outnumbered. They weren't expecting, like, he was going to Earth basically to check on it, right? And they had no idea the Yeerks were actually there in force.
Yeah, and this is technically the prologue of the Alien, kind of.
Yeah,
but from Elfangor's perspective.
Book number 8, the Alien. Yeah. So we see more of that. He is outnumbered. The dome ship's destroyed. He takes a fighter down. He's mortally wounded.
Beginning of the series. We've basically seen this scene in the prologue. This is where he's crashing on Earth, looking for the time matrix. He remembers burying it in this forest on Earth, which, when he goes back there now, he's discovered that, oh crap, it's a construction site, a happening construction site, and there's no possible way he's going to be able to find the time matrix in time.
Let alone dig it up and do
all that. Exactly.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the strength to do anything useful anymore, but he does happen to meet a group of humans.
And I want to stop you here. Something we kind of glossed over. What was incredibly sad about the choice he makes with the Ellimist is, as he's leaving, he's already said yes to the Ellimist. He's veering off at his time. He finds out she'd been going to the doctor because something was wrong with her, and she thought she was sick, but she was actually pregnant with his half-human, half-Andalite child.
Well, it's technically
it's half Andalite in the fact that he is an Andalite. I mean, he's
it's
in Morph.
Andalite in soul.
Point is, it's got some Andalite DNA. Just because morphine doesn't change your core who you are, it just changes your structure. So
yeah, okay. Point is, we glossed over that, and it is quite important to the plot that Lauren was pregnant with Elfangor's child.
And how screwed up is the Ellimist? That, he said he was going to change Lauren's memories and stuff, but he gave her some crap memories. Like, he made her like a dysfunctional human who's married to somebody else, and he didn't really fix her because she constantly felt like she lost something in Elfangor.
That's true. Well, we don't see any more of Lauren throughout the story, do we?
No, it mentions briefly that when he meets the group of humans in the construction site, obviously the Animorphs, and his son, Tobias, which that's a huge reveal.
I was not expecting that.
Yeah, huge reveal. Go ahead, Nate.
I want to comment on Lauren real quick. What I took that as, with Lauren being broken basically for the rest of her life, is one of two things. Either that the Ellimist just didn't care, but more optimistically, at least in my opinion, that they aren't perfect and they aren't necessarily all powerful. Granted, I'm saying that as someone that hasn't read any of the other books in the series. Yeah. But that's kind of what I thought. Okay, well maybe they can't take care of every tiny little detail and make a perfect fake memory or whatever.
Or you could say that the Ellimist is all powerful, but the power of love is something the Ellimist can't beat. And that's
the power of love.
And her love for Elfangor was more powerful than God himself. Boom.
So he's not all powerful because he can't overcome the power of love?
Look, if the Ellimist creates a rock that's too big for him to carry. Anyway, so here's what I want to know. So this ending part with the reveal of Tobias and the Animorphs and he's dying, the Visitor 3 comes to kill him or whatever. Did you get anything out of this ending right here, Nate, since you don't know the Animorphs or care about them yet?
Well, I guess to what degree do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, it is a huge, huge reveal in the series that Tobias, a main character who has an incredibly sad story, that Elfangor, the guy who gave them the power to morph, is his father. That was a huge reveal.
Yeah, so that wasn't... I mean, basically, here's the timeline for me. Elfangor, you've got a son that I'm not going to let you meet. Maw. And then he crashes, meets 5 humans, and I thought, I bet one of those is his son.
Oh, that's kind of...
And sure enough,
yeah,
it was.
I guess that's kind of poignant on its own.
Well, and I think it's cool that he mentions that he sees, like, all their timelines, and, you know, he sees the 5 humans, and he sees his brother's timeline intersect with them, so he kind of... It's almost like the DBZ special, the Bardock, Father of Goku, where he gets the ability to kind of see in the future, and, you know, he knows Goku's going to beat Frieza, so everything's kind of cool. Well, so the book ends on kind of a happier note, where he dies, but he's still able to give the humans the morphing power, and he is hopeful that his son is going to continue on the fight against the
I do like that it ends, like the whole book, Nate doesn't know this obviously, but throughout the entire book series up to this point, so 13 books, we've only known Elfangor as this hero who bravely gave humans a way to fight against this unstoppable force. So this book does 2 things really well. I'm not trying to get my review here, but it does 2 things really well in the sense that it shows us that he was an incredibly flawed, for lack of a better term, human being, who, you know, he wasn't really human. I'm just saying that he was flawed. He wasn't a perfect prince, but by the end of the story, you haven't changed your real opinion of him, because even though he sees himself as doing all these terrible things, he was an incredible hero who bravely looked into death while he gave his son the power to keep fighting and looked down his mortal enemy. Like, he was everything we already thought he was. He just revealed more of his backstory. Right.
Well, Elfangor's basically had like 3 different lives.
Yeah.
I mean, he had his life, you know, before choosing to become a human, and then becoming a human, and then going back and being a Andalite hero.
Yeah.
So he's the king of do-overs, I guess.
Yep. And that's the book. That's it.
Yeah, that is the book in its entirety. And it's a doozy. We're sitting at about 3 hours right now.
So yeah, that's the book. Let's jump straight into the reviews. We're pushing the time limits on this. We're almost becoming Nothlets at this point.
It's a long episode. This is our Hirek Dalest, actually.
Pretty much.
Wondering which roller coaster has the highest top speed, or what exhibit is our guide's favorite in the park? Just ask them. They love to share their opinions and critical analysis to help you better plan your day.
So, jumping straight into the views, we're gonna give it to Nate first. Guest host, we're gonna force him to go first. So
big guest honors. Don't let us down.
All right, well,
we want to know what a non-fan thinks of this book.
All right, well, thank you for the lead off, guys. So I want to start my review by saying that I did never get into this series as a kid. I honestly didn't know much about it. But even with that, I didn't think I'd like it. As a kid, I wasn't much of a reader. I'm still not too much of a reader. But looking back, I think that having read this, I think I would have liked it when I was younger. Using that language, that doesn't mean that I don't like it now. I don't have the nostalgia associated with it that you guys have, which I think is a really big driving force for you guys in being able to reread it and go back through these and talk about it and have a podcast of it. So for me, I actually came up with 2 ratings, and I don't know if that's okay.
Illegal.
I came up with a rating with me as an adult, and with a retrospective rating that I think I would have given it had I either been into this as a kid or reading it as a kid. So my adult rating was a low to mid 3 out of 5. It's got some really interesting story points to it. It has some ethical dilemmas, such as when Elfangor is deciding, well, is it okay that we dump the Yeerks? And he decides no, ultimately, just as one example. So I think that's kind of cool, but at the end of the day, I don't know if it's enough to really fully engage me at this point. However, I would say, had I read this as a kid, and was able to look back on it, I think I would really be in the solid 4 range out of 5, which I think is a pretty good rating. I think a perfect 5 out of 5 is almost unattainable, so 4 out of 5 is saying a lot. And yeah, I kind of feel like I missed out.
You certainly did. I can't believe you went to your Scholastic book fair and passed up on this beautiful cover.
So hold on. 3/4 out of 5. What?
Oh, Andalites?
Ooh. Classic.
Yeah.
I thought it fitting being the Andalite Chronicles.
Okay, yeah, right.
Okay, I want to go next. I'm gonna go next. So I think that score of yours is given based on 2 things. I think I agree with you completely. You don't have the nostalgia factor. You are kind of just reacting to this random story, and I think I stand by your point of giving it a review score for if you had read it when you were younger versus now. I also think, though, if you take the nostalgia away, you could also give it a score based on if you were aware of the rest of the series. Because that is a pretty exciting part of this book, is thinking you know this character and being wrong. And also having that lead up to that first book, which the first book, I think we both give it 5 out of 5s, because it's a very, very well-written book. At least the first book to lead into the series is incredible. So to have this heading towards that, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty good. And I think that does add a lot. So it does stand alone on its own, but without that, I can definitely see why you would feel like you're missing something almost. But now to go to my review.
Yeah, get to it.
Get into it. So this book is one I've read all the Chronicles, obviously. This isn't my favorite Chronicles book. It's got a ton of interesting stuff, and I really enjoyed reading it, obviously, and I am a fan of the series, so I love seeing how it leads into that first book, especially with that prologue and epilogue. But I think the biggest problem with this book is it shows us glimpses of so much we want to read about. I want to read about Arist Andalites training to become warriors. I want to read about the Prince class system within the Andalite military. I want to read about different planets like the Taxxon home planet, kind of, but I don't want to spend like half the book there. And while I love the Ellimist, I love all the Ellimist stuff, I thought that completely overpowered this book. And like Mitch, you pointed out, once we're on Earth, I want to read Elfangor on Earth, trying to get over the fact that he's left his entire race behind and he's given up on the fight. And he's just living on Earth as a human in this. He's trying to be happy and have a family with an alien race, and that is so incredibly interesting, and I want that book, and we don't get it. We get a montage that leads us away from that, and so that's what I think is the biggest sin of this book. As interesting and as enjoyable as to read, the biggest sin of this book is introducing amazing concepts and then running as fast away as it could, and then running as fast as it can away from those concepts, and you're just like, no, stay there. Now we're in this crazy Ellimist created time matrix world that I don't really care about. I mean, it's a cool concept, but like way too much time there. And yeah, I don't know. This book kept leading me in places I wanted to go and then punching me in the face and running away. So it's really frustrating to read, especially as a fan of the series and all the universe and stuff. So it's still not my favorite Chronicles book. That said, it is incredibly important, and the Tobias reveal cannot be understated. It's amazing. But I think I'm going to agree, even with my nostalgia and with my knowing the rest of the series, I'm going to agree with Nate's original score of a 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5 time matrices. That is my score.
You son of a bitch. You took
I
mine.
know.
I was going to use the time matrix.
Yeah, so 3 out of 5, that might be surprising to people, but when I'm actively yelling at the book in front of me with no one else around me, because it's not doing what I want it to, I can't give it a 4 even.
You can't even. Wow. I agree with some of the things you say, but I have to find fault with a lot of your nitpicks. While I agree that this book introduces so many awesome concepts, I believe we are given the accurate amount of information we need to kind of glimpse these different cultures and these different races. And it all works out. The thing you got to remember, though, is that this is Elfangor's story. It's a story about Elfangor, and that's primarily what it is. You're worried, or you're disappointed that it doesn't give you all this other information that you wanted, but really it's just here to tell us Elfangor's story and prepare us for how this feeds into the actual series. Where I agree with you is that, yeah, there's so much more of this that I wanted. This should have been its own series. It should have been a prequel series of, a couple books. And longer than just these 3-part things that they stitch into one book. Him adjusting to life as a human could have easily been its own book. As well as, other key things like him rising through the ranks of the Andalite army and all that. It's all very interesting stuff that we would love to see more of, but overall, we can have it fed to us in these little blurbs and these little summaries because it works. It tells the story of Elfangor and it gets us to where we need to be. The point where he's dying and giving his, final will and testament, basically. So, I don't think it's really a secret that I love this book. This was the book that introduced the idea that there could be such things as prequels and, spin-off series and all that. So I was incredibly excited for this when it first came out. It did not disappoint me back then. Rereading it as an adult, there were a couple points that I noticed that tended to drag on a little bit, like you mentioned, that final stretch where they're in the weird time matrix blend world. Lasted a little longer than I would have liked. I think they could have given maybe a little bit more stuff of Elfangor on Earth in exchange for some of that weirdness that happened there. And I'd have been just fine with it. But other than that, the story really doesn't disappoint. And yeah, sets up Tobias being related to Elfangor, which makes Axe Tobias' uncle, by the way.
Yeah.
It really gives their relationship an entirely different feel, knowing that context. And it's weird because I don't even think either of those characters know that they have that relationship.
For a long time.
But
they figured it out eventually.
Okay, but the readers, we know now, and it's just, it's I don't know, it makes it more special, because they've already got kind of a deep friendship connection, and now it just makes more sense. But anyway, I love the book, and while I see that it has some flaws, they aren't enough to make me dislike the book in any way or have any sort of complaints other than, yeah, it might have dragged on in a couple points, and a lot of it seemed to be based on, coincidences of them going from one bad situation to another, but in a science fiction adventure written for, young adults or children, it's to be expected. It totally worked out, and it did not disappoint me at any point. So I'm going to end up giving it a final score of 4 out of 5 yellow Mustangs.
Wow. Yep. Well.
Boom. Were you expecting that, or did you think I was going to go full board 5?
I think if you would have gone first, you would have gone to 5.
No.
Influence.
No, absolutely not. I was going to do the very stereotypical, I love it, giving it 5, it's perfect. But yeah, rereading it and just talking about it just now, I realized there are a lot of things that do occur in this book that were unnecessary.
Hey,
such as the keeping the aged bodies.
Yeah, and I think we had the same. We pretty much had the same opinion, just that it's almost it's not really a pacing problem, but it's a structure problem where it's like all the elements of the story I want are there. It's just a matter of how much time they spend on this versus this.
I actually will agree with that. One of the things, as I was reading through this, that I don't necessarily want to say that I thought was missing, but that I thought just kind of didn't seem quite right, was exactly that. And you said it perfectly, that it just seems to be kind of almost a spin focus from from what you want to be reading versus what you are reading. So I appreciate that you said that.
Yeah, I mean,
I never spun my focus.
because I mean, it's like you pointed out in your review, you kind of made it sound like that I don't appreciate this version of Elfhanger's story, but this is the perfect Elfhanger story. I'm perfectly fine with it. It's just the parts that I wanted to read were there. They were just like in montage style, and then we were, driving the yellow Mustang for 15 pages and things like that.
That scene did not last that long.
I know. I'm just saying.
It was pretty long.
I'm just saying. It's just and a lot of the Taxxon homeworld stuff was super rushed. I mean, it was just like, and now Civil War is happening. Like you said, would have been perfect if this were like 4 or 5 books. They could have focused on everything, and it would have been crazy epic. But shoved into one book, it's pretty crazy.
Well, and you also got to take into consideration that she was writing this thing in, like, over the span of a month or maybe 2.
Here, real quick, is this your favorite Chronicles book, though, Mitch?
Yeah, I would say so, although I haven't read Hork-Bajir Chronicles, and Vizir's not really, that wouldn't be considered a Chronicles book.
It's a separate book that focuses on a character who isn't a main protagonist in the normal series.
Okay, well, I don't think I'd call that one of my favorites either. I would say Andalite Chronicles is maybe if we reread...
If the Olympus Chronicles didn't exist... Well, I haven't read Hork-Bajir Chronicles. I think I've read parts of it a long time ago. So that's going to be a complete surprise, too. But if the Olympus Chronicles didn't exist, Vizir would be one of my favorite books in the series. That's another one that's just well done.
So that's basically it for the book and for our reviews. We had some Reddit comments, some emails. I think what we're going to end up doing is saving them for next week. This episode has already gone quite long enough, and I think we feel like we're at a good place to end for the evening. Wouldn't you all agree?
Yes, it's our longest episode yet, even if I edit half of it.
Wow, so that should be a good one.
Well, I want to real quick say thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this, and thank you for giving me the gift of Andalite Chronicles and introducing me to the Animorphs universe.
Oh, well, speaking of which, we've got one last surprise for you.
Oh.
We're giving you the power to morph.
I think that's... yeah, right. No,
Yes.
I was going to say, I hold in my hand the first book in the Animorph series, book 1, The Invasion. I want to know, right here and now, I'm going to put you on the spot. I want to know, will you task yourself to read this and come back on a later episode and give us your opinions? Considerably shorter than the Andalite Chronicles.
I think I could handle that. I mean, if everybody that listens to this isn't like, oh my god, I don't want to hear more of that Nate guy. He's so terrible. If that's not the case, sure, I would come back and share my thoughts of it.
Well, we've had an interesting time picking the brain of somebody who hasn't read the main series, and it's so weird to do that in a situation where we can't even really talk about the main series.
Yeah.
However, we think the first book holds up as truly one of the best books in the series, and an excellent beginning to a sci-fi series.
And I just want to say, so what I was expecting when Nate was going to come on board, I was like, oh, sweet, I love hanging out with Nate. He's a cool guy. I'm sure he'll add some funny comments or whatever, and it'll make a good episode just having a third person on there. But I was actually really surprised that when you did, when you were into a subject and we talked about it, it was actually a third distinct opinion that wasn't just, chiming in. It was actually something I hadn't thought of or Mitch hadn't thought of. And that's why me and Mitch think that this podcast works, because we have pretty different views and we generally, fight and argue about them. And we each generally say something that surprises the other person. I wasn't expecting another third piece of that to come in and bring something I hadn't thought about. So I was really happy.
You're so smart. You're like one of those AIs.
I was really happy with how this episode turned out, and it surprised me myself. So
I'm glad I could be a strong contributor.
Next time, let's have Robert as a guest and see how it goes.
Wait, was I supposed to laugh at that, or did I just offend somebody?
No, I think it'll be a wholly entertaining experience for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think it'd be vastly more entertaining than me.
No, dude, I will say from our fans, from the people who listen to this podcast, they like us going more into tangents and talking about specific things in a really nerdy way, which is...
It's a bold claim.
Yeah, well, I think so, and that's and you brought more of that to the table, so...
Sweet. I'm glad I could help
So
out.
just be nerdier, and everything will work out in the end.
You're
Alright.
welcome anytime, sir. Not just for special
Thank you.
event books.
So shall we point out the fact that next time we will be reading and reviewing Animorphs book number 14, correct?
Yep, a Cassie book, right?
Yeah. Did neither of us look this up? Is it The Change? Or no, it's The Unknown, isn't it?
I don't know. It's the unknown.
Yeah, I know. I have no idea what it is. No, it's
book 14.
Yeah, book
though.
14.
It's 14.
The Unknown, I believe.
Mhm.
And this book I am actually super excited to read because it is the first Animorphs book in the main continuity that I know for a fact I skipped over as a child. I took one look at that front cover of Cassie turning into a horse and was like, I don't think I need to read this one.
I think I read it, but I can't remember. And we are now getting into the Cassie books where I don't think we're going to be as harsh on her. She becomes a much more interesting character in these teen books, the 11 through 19 especially. So hopefully the people who've been pissed off that we've just been shitting on Cassie for the last 13 episodes, hopefully they'll turn around and start listening again.
Well, I don't know. I have no idea if this book will do this. I've never read
Maybe
this
we'll
one,
get
so
worse.
It'll be interesting.
Maybe we'll hate her even more. No, I don't think so. Cassie becomes one of the best characters. So, yeah, I think we can wrap it up. I do want to give a shout out real quick before we go into the main ending. At this point, I'll have edited together completely new intros and segues for the show. Hopefully you like them and they're not too out there. I tried to be fairly different than other podcasts with how we would have our show intros and segues and how they're direct influenced from the books. So, email us, shout us on Reddit what you think of them. But I can I have to give credit to Beth Kohler, who is a part of the Animorphs audiobook project. I believe she plays Rachel. She helped us out with the voice acting for the new intro and segues. So that is all credit to Beth Kohler. Thank you so much for doing that and for the, just basically us giving her a shout out on the show, doing it for free. So
At the time we're recording this, I haven't even heard the files yet, so should be interesting.
yeah. So yeah, that's it. So thanks for listening. You can find more ways to listen to the show by going to Thoughtspeakcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at Morphcast or like us on Facebook. Send us your thoughts on an upcoming episode by emailing us at thoughtspeakcast@gmail.com and we'll read it on the air. Except in an episode like this where we're too tired.
Right.
Finally, reviews on iTunes, especially for this episode. We just brought in a third guest, which we haven't done before. I think a lot of podcasts are, they range from 2 to 5 people. So this is our first, bringing a third person. So we definitely, if you thought that was a good idea, tell us on iTunes. Give us reviews or just chime in on Reddit, whatever you think. I specifically want to hear about what you think of just bringing in a third guest in general, because I'm sure we're going to try to bring in tons of people, and hopefully Nate will grace us with his presence again at some point. So, yeah.
We'll make it happen one way or another.
Yeah. We'll time down like Jake in the capture. And
I have ways of dealing with people like him.
What does that mean?
You don't need to know yet.
Anyway, so yeah, iTunes. Jump on there, shoot us a review, help out the show, get more people to listen to it. That's how you do it. So, yeah, that's it. That's the show for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed this special event Chronicles episode that's incredibly way too long. But hopefully you enjoyed it. So,
And join us next time for the book I've never read.
all right, you guys want to do anything special? Sign off with 3 people, like shout at the same time and high five in the air.
We could say the chronic what of Andalites.
We could do that. Or we could do the generic, my name is... What? My name is... Who? My name is...
Elfinger Sornell, blah, blah, blah.
Ticka. Elfangor Shady. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
No. That's it for me.
well, that's it for our special event episode. Join us next week as we get back into the normal stride of things. My name is Coleman.
And my name is Mitchell.
And I'm Nate.
Ooh, we said it!
See you next time.
On behalf of everyone here at the Gardens, we hope you've enjoyed your stay and welcome you to come and see us again soon. Or, as they say on the Serengeti, Tafadali mtu kupata jambo hili nje ya kichwa yangu.